Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. I oftentimes get comments asking me what the best ways to help out the channel are, and honestly, just dropping a like, subscribing if you haven't already, and maybe if you want to go above and beyond, telling a friend about the channel is always very, very appreciated. But yeah, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. We just have 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads. I hope you all enjoy them. I always do my best to make sure that I'm not uploading slop, and of course, this video is no different. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy the 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads right after the ad break after this intro. There will not be any more ad breaks after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. I don't believe in family curses. I always thought that was something out of bad movies, something superstitious. People made up to blame for their own failures. My family was always normal. My dad, Joseph, Joe to his friends, was a retired engineer, a widower for 15 years, a methodical man who labeled every box in the house. My mom died of cancer when I was a teenager, and after that, it was just us two in a quiet, respectful routine. I met Sophie 8 months ago at a coffee shop near my work. She ordered a double espresso, and I spilled my cappuccino all over her table trying to grab a napkin. A complete disaster. She laughed, a clean, warm laugh, and said she'd forgive me if I bought her another coffee. The rest is a cliché. Dates, movies, weekends together. Meeting the friends, meeting the family. My dad loved her. Polite girl, beautiful, looks you in the eye. He said after I brought her over for dinner, "Don't let her get away, son." I didn't plan on it. My dad died 3 weeks ago. A stroke. It was fast, painless, but the emptiness he left behind is enormous. Sophie has been my rock through all of it. She moved in to help me sort through things, clean the house, decide what to donate, sell or keep. She cooks. She keeps me company. She holds my hand when I wake up in the middle of the night with that feeling that I've forgotten something important. I had no idea how literal that feeling would become. My dad's house is one of those old places with big rooms and a basement he turned into a storage space over the years. We spent the first week on the main floor, kitchen, living room, bedrooms. Then we moved up to the attic, and yesterday, we finally went down to the basement. Sophie stayed in the kitchen making lunch when I went down the wooden stairs that creaked in protest. The smell was mildew and old paper, that smell of frozen time. Bare bulbs hanging from the low ceiling lit up shelves crammed with cardboard boxes, all labeled in my dad's neat handwriting. I started with the shelves on the left. Documents 1990 through 2000. Photos, miscellaneous. Family heirlooms. I grabbed the photo box, sat on a old wooden bench, and started flipping through. Just regular photos. Me as a kid, my dad younger, my mom still alive. I cried a little, I'll admit. Then I put it all away and moved on to the next box. Old albums. Inside I found 3 hardcover albums with those black pages and sticky corner mounts. The first one was from the 80s. My dad with long hair, floral shirts, hugging friends at parties, graduation photos, a few of my grandmother, who died when I was 2. It was the second album where everything changed. A 4x6 photo, color but slightly yellowed with age. My dad in his early 20s, arm around a girl at the beach. She was wearing a red bikini, laughing at the camera, her head resting on his shoulder, black, straight hair. Almond-shaped eyes, tan skin, a perfect, wide smile. My heart stopped. It was Sophie, the same Sophie who was, at that very moment, in my kitchen making pasta. I took a deep breath. Lookalikes exist. Doubles are more common than you think. Probably an aunt, a grandmother, someone in her family who looked just like her, even the faint scar on her left eyebrow. My mom always said I was too skeptical for my own good. I turned the page. There she was again, now in an older photo, black and white, edges slightly worn. She was sitting on a park bench next to a man in a suit and a hat, a man I recognized as my grandfather, Anthony, from the photos my dad had in the living room. My grandfather was smiling shyly at the camera. She was smiling too. The same Sophie, the same expression, the same high-colored dress my grandmother wore in a wedding photo I knew by heart. My hands started shaking. I flipped through pages frantically looking for newer photos, older photos, anything that could explain this. I found a third, a fourth. She was in a family portrait from the 40s, standing behind my great-grandparents, her hands on my great-grandmother's shoulders. She was in a graduation photo of my great-uncle from the 60s, wearing a floral dress. She was in a Polaroid from the 70s, hugging a distant cousin I never met. Always her, always the same. I slammed the album shut and just sat there, listening to my own heart hammering in my chest. Upstairs, Sophie's voice hummed a tune I didn't recognize. I needed more information. I needed to understand. I put the album back at the bottom of the box, went up the stairs and walked right past the kitchen, mumbling something about needing air. I locked myself in my dad's office, a small room at the back of the house he used as a retreat. Inside, his computer was still on, an old desktop full of folders and files. I started digging. My dad was organized even in his digital life. There was a folder labeled Family. Inside, subfolders. Parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, cousins, historical documents. I opened the first one. Digitized photos from even older albums, probably stored somewhere I hadn't found yet. My great-grandfather, James, in 1920, serious and bearded, in front of a simple house, and next to him, wearing a light dress and a straw hat. Sophie, the same, untouched by time. I opened another folder, great-great-grandparents, a sepia photo with serrated edges. My great-great-grandfather, William, in military uniform, probably from World War I, and next to him, in a long dress with a serene look. Sophie, young, beautiful, eternal. The last folder was genealogy. My dad had digitized old documents, birth, marriage, death certificates, hand-drawn family trees. I kept clicking until I found a folder called Parish Records 1800 to 1850. Photos of handwritten documents in old script. Difficult to read. One was the baptismal record of my great-great-great-grandfather Isaac from 1837. Next to it, a pencil notation. Married to Mary, record not found. And then I saw the next image, a photograph, the oldest I had ever seen, a daguerreotype, more like a metal plate than a photo. Two faces emerged from the dark background, almost ghostly. A man with a thick beard, deep-set eyes, a young woman in a high-collared dress, her hair in a tight bun. The woman was Sophie. The man was my great-great-great-grandfather. The folder had more photos. She appeared in several, in a portrait alone with an enigmatic smile, in a group photo, next to children who must have been my ancestors as kids. Always the same, always unchanging, a constant in the lineage of the men in my family. I sat in the chair, my entire body ice cold. She had been there, in every generation. She had dated my dad, dated my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, my great-great-great-grandfather. What happened to all of them? A horrible idea started forming in my mind. My dad, widowed at 50, healthy, active, died of a stroke at 72. Normal? Maybe. My grandfather, Anthony, died of heart complications at 58, according to my dad. I never looked into it. My great-grandfather, James, died young too, in a farm accident. Always vague stories, told with sighs and silences. She was the only constant. She was there, and they disappeared. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made me jump. The doorknob turned. "Honey, you in there? Lunch is ready." Her voice, sweet and concerned. The same voice that comforted me every night. The same voice that must have comforted my dad decades ago. I opened the door. She was standing there in an apron, a wooden spoon in her hand. Her hair was tied up carelessly. Her face slightly flushed from the stove heat. Beautiful, perfect, and terrifying. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head. "You look..." "Fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just missing him, you know? Going through his stuff." She nodded sympathetically, reached out and touched my face. "Come eat. I'll help you in here later if you want." I followed her to the kitchen like a sleepwalker. I sat at the table. I ate the pasta without tasting it. She talked about her day, about a neighbor who said hi, about the prices at the market. I answered in monosyllables, my eyes fixed on her, trying to find a crack, an imperfection, something that would reveal the monster. I found nothing. Just a beautiful woman who loved me, who cooked for me, who slept next to me. Night fell. She went to take a shower. I stayed in the living room, my phone in my hand, thinking about calling someone. The police, a priest, anyone. But what would I say? My girlfriend is the same person appearing in photos from the 19th century? They'd lock me up. When the shower turned off, I made a decision. I needed to confront her. Not aggressively, but carefully. I needed to see her reaction. She came out of the bathroom in a robe, wet hair dripping over her shoulders. Beautiful. Always so beautiful. "Sophie?" I called, my voice steadier than I expected. "Can I show you something?" She smiled, curious. "Sure." I led her to the office, turned on the computer, opened the folder with the photos. She stood behind me, her warm breath on my neck. I showed her the first photo, her with my dad at the beach. "Who's that?" I asked, pointing. She tilted her head, frowned. "Wow, she looks just like me, huh? Must be a relative of yours. Your grandmother, maybe? Cousin?" I showed her the second one, her with my grandfather. Again, the resemblance is incredible. Strong genes, huh? I showed her the third one, her with my great-grandfather. Silence. I showed her the fourth one, her with my great-great-grandfather. The silence stretched like a razor's edge. Then she laughed, a low laugh, different from the clean one I knew. Older, tired. "You were always so curious, weren't you, Joe?" My blood ran cold. "My name is Luke," I corrected, my voice barely a whisper. She placed her hand on my shoulder, a light, almost affectionate touch. "I know, sweetheart, but you're just like him. Exactly like him. The same way of furrowing your brow when you're worried. The same nail-biting habit. The same smell." I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't obey. She leaned in, her lips brushing my ear. "Your father was the best of them, you know. The sweetest. I was so sad when he left, but then you appeared. So similar. So him. It was like he had come back." "What are you?" I managed to ask. She sighed as if the question was tedious. "Doesn't matter. I've been with so many of you, since your great-great-great-grandfather Isaac. He found me in the woods, you know. Said I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Took me home, introduced me to the family. He was so naive." "What did you do to him?" "Nothing," she said, and there was something worse than the simplicity of the answer. "I didn't do anything. I just stayed, and one day they're gone. Like your dad. Like your grandfather. Like all of them. And I stay, waiting for the next one." I managed to stand, stumbling backward, away from her touch. She didn't move, just watched me with those deep, ancient, empty eyes. "Why me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Because you're the next one," she answered with a sad smile. "The next Joe, the next Anthony, the next James. Always the same blood, always the same smell, always the same end." I ran. I don't know how, but I ran out of the office, out the front door, into the dark street. I ran until I couldn't anymore, until my lungs burned, until I fell to my knees on the asphalt. I didn't take my phone, money, or ID. I just stayed there, gasping, staring at the empty street, at the distant house lights. She didn't follow me. She doesn't need to. Because now as I write this on a computer in a cyber cafe, using money a stranger gave me when he saw my desperation, I can feel it. I can feel her watching me from somewhere. I can smell her in the wind. I know that no matter where I go, she'll be there. She's been there for 200 years. She'll be there for 200 more. And I'm the next one. The next on the list. The next Joe. The next man in the family she chose. She said she doesn't do anything, that she just stays. But I remember my dad, healthy, active, dead of a stroke at 72. I remember my grandfather, dead at 58 of heart complications. I remember my great-grandfather, dead in a farm accident. She doesn't do anything. She just stays, and while she stays, we go. We wither, we fade, we die, and she stays, waiting, always waiting. If anyone reads this, don't try to find me. Don't try to help. Just be careful who you love. Be careful who seems too familiar. Be careful who seems like they've always been there. Because maybe, yes, they have. And maybe they're never leaving. My girlfriend and I had moved into a lovely 3-bed, detached house, nestled on a quiet rural street just out of town. Honestly, when the estate agent told us the asking price, our jaws hit the floor. We questioned whether it was too good to be true, expecting all manner of hidden issues, but we'd lived there for 2 months with almost no problems. At least, none with the house. Our street bordered 2 fairly expensive agricultural acreages, and with them cutting us off from the main body of our small town, the area had little foot or vehicle traffic. That being said, for some reason, since our move-in date, I hadn't seen another soul. Yes, there were the unmistakable sounds of people in their homes, on the street, or even the sounds of passing vehicles, but at no time did I ever emerge from the property to see them in person. Sophie didn't seem to find that concerning, especially being an introvert at heart. Simply says they might not be occupied. Still, apart from the strange feeling of being watched, which I chalk up to being the new family, something else also caught me off guard. Our dog Ronnie was an energetic and frankly loud lab, which is part of the reason we were looking for a property with a large garden, though for some reason, he wouldn't go outside. Opening the side door and even clipping him up for a walk, Ronnie would fight to stay inside. The monumental flip from a high-octane outdoorsy animal to a quiet, reserved inside dog was just bizarre. I'd occasionally persuade him out for a short toilet run in the middle of the day, but as soon as visibility dropped, he was locked to Sophie's side, almost cowering in fear of something unseen. It came to a head when I tried to get him out before bed, and it took all my strength to wrestle the squirming, flailing animal out of the door. In the process, he nipped me, which is something he'd never shown any tendencies of before moving. Sophie said he might have developed a fear of the dark due to the new environment, but I wasn't buying that. Still content to agree, I fitted a motion-activated light to our back door. though that didn't entice him to out. Working from home, as I'm a self-employed carpenter, I'd often find long discarded items as I sought to clean up my new workspace. Rummaging around my workspace, just trying to catch up with a series of slowly piling commissions, I found a small picture frame. Expecting it was simply an item left by a previous occupant, I rotated it in my hand. Though the image had sustained noticeable water damage, I imaged it, showed a family. Obscured at the back were the two parents with their daughter stood front and center, as her long black hair oscillated in the breeze of what looked to be a beautiful day. With a great view of the road from my workshop, I'd occasionally catch the faintest inkling of eyes on me, and find myself reacting to any sight, sound, or movement on our street, rushing out the gate like a crazed person. The street would be as desolate as ever. Sometimes I felt as if the otherwise ambient sounds of people doing their thing was intended to lure me out. The more I focused on that oddity, the more I started to notice. Every single property would have a light of some sort on in the evenings. Whether it was a lounge, kitchen, or bedroom light, it was evident people were actively switching them on and off. Weirder still, their cars would move, though I'd never catch them departing or returning. Moving vans, people parked on the street, even a motorbike on the drive. I stayed up for 2 consecutive nights, just watching, waiting for someone to emerge, but nothing. Slightly strange, I know, but I started cataloging everything. Each house number had a tally, anything from which room had lights on, when the cars were missing, and at what time they returned. My work stalled as the strangeness of our street took a twisted precedent. The worst things, though, were unmistakable sounds of people talking. Each noise mimicked human speech patterns exactly, though the words spoken were jumbled, matted. In each case, they were just loud enough to be heard, but not fully understood. With an instance, I swear, I could hear out a state agent mixed in amongst. In the day, the street was silent with no motion, so long as I observed. However, an echoing cacophony of family chatter filled those vacant rooms as the night drew closer. Though I'm ashamed to admit it, I peeked. Watching through those otherwise animate windows, there was nothing lifelike. The rooms lay bare, filled with just enough furniture to seem lived in from the outside, but sanitized, stale. Some part of me wanted to try the handle, just to see if there were people in, but I stopped myself. Some primal part of my brain screamed for me to back away, and I'm thankful I did. I couldn't help but bring it up to Sophie again, and she gave me that same tired response. To her, this was nothing more than another ramble about an issue I'd crafted, but I was unsettled. I tried to drop it into conversation with my supplier, cashiers, and even the homeless guy outside of the superstore, but nobody seemed to have a clue, skirting around the question and giving no clear answer. Arriving home from a later than expected delivery to a client out of town, I clambered from my car, oblivious to the dead street around me. The far-off bark of a dog or mumbled chatter from next door didn't do anything to tempt me, as it had the days prior. Glancing up at the glow of a bedroom across the street, a silhouette caught my eye. I'd been so used to the lack of expectation that I didn't even compute what the figure might have been. Though as my tired synapses fired, my attention refocused. Stood in the second-story bedroom was a window. That, or a girl, though I couldn't make out their face fully. She had long, flowing black hair. Slightly excited that I had actually seen a living person in one of those houses, I waved. I don't know if it was simply a subconscious reaction or my brain seeking confirmation that I wasn't hallucinating. To my surprise, she waved back. A slower, more unnatural motion, as if she were copying an action she couldn't fully comprehend. But real movement nonetheless. Reiterating that to Sophie, I expected her to drop the sarcastic "I told you so," but her nonchalant response confused me. You joking? That couple moved out last week. Didn't you see the van? Racking my brain again, I was left with more questions, though an accident drew my focus. Some fairly loud yelling had worked Ronnie up, causing him to relieve himself on the kitchen floor. Panicking as the stream continued, I rushed him to the door, hoping he'd willingly finish up outside as the shouts still echoed back. Dropping like a rock, he fixed himself to the tiled floor, holding firm as I tried fruitlessly to yank him closer. Fortunately, he'd stopped by that time, but just to be sure, he still needed to go out. Knowing he wasn't going to budge without a fight, I opted to step out onto the fluorescent glow of the porch light, hoping that would satiate his fears. Stepping through the open doorway, the short click of the bulb returning to life silenced those scrambled barks into faint murmurs, trailing off as I emerged into the light. Taking a handful of steps to the perimeter illuminated porch, I turned to the now petrified dog. His wide yellow eyes shot past me into the shadowed black of our garden. Not as sensitive as his, my eyes didn't outline that gang of misshapen silhouettes at first. Staring deeper into the inky black, I quickly grasped what they were. Anywhere from 5 to 10 humanoid shapes glared back through blank visages. Each one jerked in a spastic twitch as their forms fluctuated just enough to mimic the natural rhythms of a human body, though far too rigid to be flesh. Feeling each ice-cold sweat bead dribble down my brow, we were locked in place for who knows how long. Each second I stood petrified. The silence stirred. The group muttered, each sound getting louder and louder, though far too scattered to be decipherable. Mustering the courage to take one step backwards, still locked in on their forms, they advanced at an identical pace. Sadly, that prolonged period of petrification had triggered the resulting click. Instantaneously, my body flung back for the door, reaching for the handle as the porch light returned to life once again, slamming that brittle barrier close behind me. I collapsed against it as they called, louder than before, enough to draw Sophie's attention. She questioned what I was doing, but I couldn't mumble out the right string of words to get her to understand. My jumbled sputters were not dissimilar to those still human-adjacent calls outside. Pushing me back away from the barrier I'd held in place, she stepped to the frame. It was almost as if I knew what she was about to do, but as time stood still, I was powerless. In the same way your body alerts you the millisecond before your alarm blares. I knew what she was reaching for. Paralyzed, I could do nothing but watch that frail wooden door implode the moment she twisted the handle, being swallowed up by the advancing mass. Turning through tear-filled eyes, I bolted for the safest place I know, like a coward, not turning back, his yelps chasing up the stairs as those calls reverberated back to me. Slamming the door and heaving my bed up, their croaks quickly reached my makeshift blockade. Though I couldn't be sure how strong or cognitive they were, it didn't matter. Mixed in with the jumbled mess of voices, still regurgitating broken sounds, was her soft tones, unmistakable in the amalgam symphony. I knew what she wanted. I questioned opening that door, but no matter how much I may have once cared for the person they'd once signified, I knew they were as hollow as this street. As soon as I relayed my address, the operator on the other end cut the line, leaving me with no hope of salvation. I doubt I'm the first, and I scarcely believe I'll be the last. Right now I have no way out. I can hear a new wave outside the window, though they're obscured by the descent below. If I make it until the morning, maybe they'll disperse, avoid being fully viewed. But that's a long shot. I doubt they'll let me leave so easily. Maybe if you're here next, moving into a beautiful property that's just too good to be true, you'll hear me. Another puppeteered voice just audible enough to give the illusion of an unassuming neighborhood. Leave while you have the chance to. There are no people living on Holloway Lane. The alarm blares and I slam the button before it could scream again, like slapping an extremely obnoxious fly. Still blinking away sleep, I check the system to my right as it scrolls through the reports. Minor impact, debris strike. More scrolling, more reports. All systems nominal, bar a slight drain on the main power. All normal. I maneuver my arms, pressing them against the sarcophagus of my sleeping pod before sliding them up in front of my body. It gets easier every time. Reaching up near my head, I pull the release and slowly reveal myself to my small home. I silence the remaining alarms and begin my routine to prepare for a spacewalk. "Good morning. How was your sleep?" A somewhat feminine voice calls. "Sleep was fine," I reply. "What's for breakfast? Bagels, cereal, eggs?" "Nothing better than good old nutrient paste today." "Tasty. And what shall you do today?" "The usual. Repairs and spacewalks." "Fantastic. And finally, how are you feeling?" I open my mouth but hesitate, the words almost forming out of habit. I hold the pause. "That's great to hear," the voice says anyway. I glance toward the speaker mounted on the wall and reach over, pressing stop in the recording. The cabin falls quiet, the sudden absence heavier than the noise ever was. I wish I could mimic my partner's voice perfectly, but my subpar attempt will have to do. I kiss my hand and press my hand to the crude drawing of her next to the speaker. I wish I was also a better artist. I take in my surroundings again, my 2-meter cube, everything an adult needs, reduced to essentials. A nutritional paste dispenser, a waste hole, a suit holder, scraps of paper with scrawled notes and half-finished thoughts, drifting lazily in the air. Great indeed, I whisper. The station hums around me, old, tired, still breathing. So am I. I suit up in the cramped space, kicking the flittering papers aside as I force my leg in, slipping once again into a cavity made for a larger man. The suit holds me fast, rugged and unforgiving, but it will keep me alive out there. I brace myself against the wall and slide down as it seals along my back. A slight modification I made myself, against protocol. It would be a lot easier if someone else were here to help me suit up, but that's not going to happen. Finalizing the process, I grab the helmet from its niche and slide it over my head, clipping it into the chest ring. The readouts flash. O2 levels are lower than my previous walk. The CO2 scrubbers and OGS are probably slowing down. Finally, while securing my tool bag, I slide into another hole, much like a torpedo tube, but instead of firing a missile or ordnance, the ordnance is me. I flick the cycle switch, and the airlock spins up, depressurizing the small chamber before the exterior hatch opens and I am free to let the void take me. I crawl out onto the surface of my workstation. At this rotation, I am facing oblivion, the emptiness of space, flickering lights of distant stars and planets peeking into my insignificant life. When I exit my safety net on the side, there is nothing to orient me. No horizons, no planet below to remind me why I am up here. The pause lingers longer than usual. Instead of starting my walk, I stare, drifting. I let go of the metal, just to see if it will take me today. I drift longer and longer towards its inky blackness. Maybe this time I will be swallowed up. Then the tether tightens and snaps me back to consciousness. Not today, I guess. I crawl back along the line, letting my view of the satellite fill my vision as deep gray clouds frame it below. Another storm is forming, a massive one by the look of it. I wish I could hear the rain, instead of my own breathing and the vibrations traveling up my arms as my hands grip the line. I touch down on the surface and crest over the hole, making my way towards one of the large dishes that pockmark the craft skin. I keep looping my tether into the small hooks I have bolted over the tiles, shortening its length and securing it as I go, much like a mountaineer climbing ice. The beating rhythm of my movements vibrates through me, my breath radiating through my helmet. As I breathe, I sense something strange, a presence from in my suit. Another sound pushes through, breaking the normality. Another breath. I pause and hold on to the side of the satellite. There's a moment where I breathe and I swear I hear something else accompany my intake. Delayed by a brief moment, for a split second, I tense as I think that a creature sits inside my suit, breathing my air. I stay still, counting my breaths. A few pass, and I only hear my own. All that sleep, and I'm still exhausted. Soon I reach the dish and begin the procedures. I check the dish first. Structurally, it's fine, just a minor hit from debris. I wrench the fragment loose and let it drift off into space. It's long and jagged, clearly part of something bigger, maybe another satellite. It spins once, then disappears into the void, out of sight, out of mind. A shallow dent near the rim catches my eye, a tiny crack spreading from it. Nothing serious, but left alone it could worsen. I press a patch over the crack, smoothing it down until it sticks. Simple, effective, not perfect, but enough. Next comes alignment. I loosen the bolts just enough to nudge the dish by hand, watching the orientation ticks crawl across my visor. The curve is holding, close enough. That's all it needs to keep sending and receiving. Not that it does much these days. Once that's done, I crawl over to the control box and plug in my PDA. The cable slots in easily. A soft calibration tone pulses through the system while I watch the signal meter. Peaks, dips, mostly nonsense. Nothing worth celebrating. I stare at the readout for longer than I should. I could cry, yell, scream, or bang my hand against the hole, but there is no point. A deep sigh racks me instead as I download the audio samples and begin the trek back. My return is slower this time. The question I've been sitting on all this time keeps gnawing at me. Why? Why do I do this? Why do I subject myself to it? I crawl along the vast hunk of space junk back towards the quarters. The sheer size of it, compared to where I live, go to the bathroom, and sleep. I could fit an entire house inside this thing. Instead, I get a glorified outhouse, a garden shed with delusions of importance. As I slowly untangle my tether from the hooks, I crest the hole one last time and stare out into the void. Maybe someone is looking at me right now. Maybe there is an alien craft, speeding through the ink towards us, towards me, to pull me out of this nonsense and carry me somewhere else. I keep looking before a shadow blots out a few of the stars. It catches my eye, a shape casting a blackness. It's not debris. A silhouette cuts briefly across the field of distant lights, a wrong shape. I swear that it looks human, but wrong. A body without detail, no suit, no tether. It moves on naturally, as if it was a paper kite, caught in an impossible wind, moving with no rhythm or reason. Its long arms looked to have been dragged out of a depressurization event as it reaches out, splaying itself to me. The sight fills me with a horrible chill. I blink, then it's gone. The stars are exactly where they were before. No distortion, no shape, nothing drifting. I blink hard, shake my head inside the helmet, and force my eyes to track known points. Counting the stars, anchoring myself. Get a grip, I whisper. The void offers no argument. I turn back to regard the world below, hoping this time it will reveal something. Instead, I am disappointed, as usual. I cannot see a single strip of ocean or land. It's not clouds that cover it, but a single cloud, thick and unbroken, covering everything with small dashes of lighting breaking up the monotonous gray. A slight smile forms in my face. Maybe someone down there is looking up at me, cheering, or just glad that I keep this communications buoy alive and humming. Maybe. I slide back into the airlock and begin pressurizing. I keep the suit on longer than necessary, just in case. Just in case the O2 decides to fail. Maybe. Maybe that would be good. I shed my suit and drift in the compartment, breathing in the recycled air. I keep my eyes closed and bask in the metallic scent and old refuse. The urge to open a window is overwhelming. After a while, something brushes the bridge of my nose. Paper, rough, too close. I open my eyes and focus on the note, already sighing at its contents. That is the final resupply. I grab it and flip the paper, already knowing the message I have read 100 times. God help us, and God bless you for your sacrifice. Maybe it's all worth it. Maybe it's not. I let go and the paper joins the other messages I have scrolled. The doodles, the personal anecdotes, the words of encouragement. They all float with the photos of people I will never see again. I plug the PDA from my suit into the console and begin downloading the data, hoping to pass some time that does not involve sleeping. I wish they sent up more pencils. Opening the laptop, I try to clean up the data stream. It is definitely a communication, a message of some sort, but the storms have scrambled it badly. I am not an audio engineer, but with finite time and nothing else to do, I can manage trying to read some dead people's mail. I see my arms again as I go to type. If anyone saw me now, they'd mistake me for an alien. My skin is pale, my frame gaunt. I blink constantly from the strain of staring at screens, so I probably look bug-like. The smell I have likely grown used to, but I am unshaven. My hair months long, any attempt to comb or brush it long discarded along with most decent human necessities. I spend hours hunched over the screen, trying to unscramble the audio. There are gaps in my memory, moments where I must have lost consciousness, though I barely recall them. East, Tango Whiskey. There's... Are smart. If there is... Listening. The pact is secure. Prot. Self. The pact is secure. Hail. The voice has an accent I cannot quite place. It drawls its words, high and imprecise, slipping in and out of clarity. I cannot make sense of what it is saying. Pact. I am not a religious man, but that is the first time I have heard anything like that. I clean up more of the audio. Anyone hearing this? Keep heading east. More of them come. Keep to your people. The pact is secure. To you listening, keep up. The static keeps breaking it apart. I keep trying to clear it. To you listening, open up. You must join the pact. I keep working the filters, stripping away noise, boosting what little remains. The words land cleanly this time. To you listening, open up. A sudden bang slams into the wall. I stiffen and slam my head into the roof, stars bursting across my vision. My body curls in on itself on instinct, spine flaring with pain. For a moment, I almost let myself drift away again. Then another bang hits the hole. I open my eyes and stare at the insulated wall. Breath loud. The station creaks, a deep metallic groan. Not like stress or thermal shift. It sounds burdened, as if weight has been added where there should be none. My thoughts race, grasping for explanations I don't believe. Thermal contraction, debris, pressure differential. Anything but intent. Is it what I saw? The thing out there? I stay still, I wait. The next impacts are smaller, measured, not collisions. Taps. My stomach turns, a slow, sickening drop, like missing a step in the dark. I glance towards the airlock and feel something cold settle behind my eyes. I don't have a viewport, no camera feed, just a sealed opening in the wall. The taps come again, closer, near the hatch. Knocking. The realization lands heavier than the sound itself. Someone, or something, is choosing where to probe. I think of how long it has been since anyone knew I was up here, since anyone spoke my name, since I was anything more than a cog in a machine. I want to shout, to announce myself, to demand answers. I don't. For the first time in what feels like a lifetime, I feel fear, so I wait. Nothing. My heart doesn't stop. I can't take a full breath. I float inside a 2-meter cube, attached like a tumor to a vast metal behemoth, and something is now probing, testing that small mass, testing if it can be opened up and squeezed empty into the void. But nothing happens. It could have been seconds or minutes. I fade in and out, despite the adrenaline. One final hit reverberates through my cell. This one sets the alarm off. The alarm screams, piercing through me as I scramble upright. I shove my arms into the suit, muscles tight, fumbling with clasps as red lights flash across the cabin. The helmet snaps into place, chest clip locked. I tug the tether from its hooks, coil it over my shoulder as I shove myself into the airlock chamber. The airlock spins up, hissing as it depressurizes, valves rattling under the strain. My heart hammers, lungs burning in the recycled air. I don't want whatever it is to catch me, so I kick off the hatch above, sliding out of the chamber just as the outer hatch opens up into the void. The tether catches, jerking me back from drifting too far. Stars stretch endlessly ahead, black and distant, as I fight to steady myself and get moving before whatever is out here decides I'm in reach. Once I turn, wrench in hand, I see nothing. Nothing but debris peppered across the hull. I take a strained breath. Sweat clings to my skin, pooling on my forehead. My eyes trace the damage from the impacts, and my fingers tighten around the wrench. A nightmare of work scattered in every direction. I yell, hurling the tool into the void. It spins once, twice, then drifts silently among the floating shards, a tiny protest against the emptiness. I let my gaze linger on the scattered debris a moment longer before I force myself to move. The tether is taut as I pull myself back towards the station. Each grip, each push reminds me how small I am against this cold, indifferent metal and the endless void beyond. I pause at the edge of my workstation, chest heaving, sweat stinging my eyes. The damage? It's worse than I first thought. Broken tiles, gouged panels, a mess that won't fix itself. Soon my hands and feet find purchase along the hull. I go to begin the routine again when a bright light catches my eye, a harsh yellow bloom, pushing up through the cloud cover below. It hurts to look at, even from here, just a single point of brightness forcing the clouds apart. My heart sinks at what it means. The explosion lingers in my vision longer after I look away. Again, I could cry, or laugh, or scream, or slam my fist into the hole, but what's the point? I float there and wait, blinking the after-image from my eyes. Then I turn back to the void. I stare longer again, waiting for an answer. None comes. So I'll give it one. I return to the large satellite dish console beneath me. Fingers fly over the keys as I type in the override, shifting the satellite in tiny bursts, using what precious thrust it has for orbital corrections. I point it at the brightest pinprick in the void, hoping, praying that it's correct. I connect the PDA again, opening the comms. I take a moment, letting my breath catch. Then I speak, voice trembling but steady, hoping it will carry. To anyone who can hear this, Mars has fallen. I repeat, Mars has fallen. My friends and I wanted to do something big together before we all went our separate ways at the end of the summer. We just recently graduated and decided we would take a trip to Mammoth Cave National Park for the weekend. It was 5:30 in the afternoon when River and Henry pulled up to the campsite in Henry's beat-up silver Pontiac. My other friends, Noah and James, greeted them excitedly. "You started a fire yet?" River asked, exiting the car, pistol on his hip. "No, James brought these crappy fire starters that don't work," Noah groaned. River was always the most outdoorsy person in the group. Though we were all raised in rural Kentucky, River spent more time in the wilderness, camping, hunting, fishing, hiking, etc. We had hoped to get the fire started before he got here, so he wouldn't give us crap. "The starters will work. Just give me one more try." James grabbed another starter. It was an empty toilet paper roll with dryer lint stuffed in the middle. He hunched over the crumbling pile of sticks and dried leaves we made and tried to light it with a lighter. No luck. "How did you get this idea again?" I asked James. "My mom thought this would be a good idea. I don't know why they won't start. I figured the dryer lint would light right up." He went back to trying to start the fire. When he once again failed, he grunted angrily and tossed the starter into the forest. It flew about 50 feet, hit a tree, and then thunked onto the forest floor. "Dude, the national park is gonna fine us for that," I said, hitting James on the shoulder. "They won't find it, and besides, it'll decompress." "Decompose?" "Whatever." I didn't know if the national park would fine us individually, or if it would all fall onto me since I made the reservation, but I knew I didn't want to find out. I made my way into the woods carefully watching for any signs of poison ivy. Luckily, it was close enough to the campsite that there was a small path that I assumed was made by people going out to pee. The path led me mostly to where the starter was, at least where I thought the starter was. When I got there, the spot was empty, all except a small tuft of lint stuck on a bush. Confused, I pulled the piece of lint from the bush and looked around, scanning the forest floor. There was nothing. I looked around one more time when my eyes locked onto something no more than 40 feet away. A yellow eye, like that of an eagle, peered just slightly from the side of the tree. Part of what I guessed was this animal's neck stuck out too. It was covered in white feathering, or maybe hair. It was hard to tell. Perhaps that was most concerning was the height of it. Nearly reaching the first branch of the large oak tree, the animal had to be at least 20 feet tall. I stood frozen. I felt ice shoot through my veins. My heart beat into overdrive. The creature just stared, unmoving. Did it know I saw it? Did it care? What was this thing? Questions shot through my mind one after another until my focus on the creature was broken. "Lucas! Lucas!" I turned my head at the sound of my name. It was Henry. He walked up, crunching leaves and twigs underfoot. I quickly turned back to look at the creature, but it was gone. "Did you find it?" Henry asked. "No, I'm not sure where it went." I kept my eyes on the tree, waiting for that thing to poke its head out again. "River got the fire started. Took him like 30 seconds. "Henry, I think there might be something out there. I just saw something peering from behind that tree." I pointed to where I saw it. Henry's gaze followed my finger, but he saw the same thing I did. Nothing. "Uh-huh," Henry said skeptically. "Well, if there is something out here, we'll be safer at camp." "Okay." I exhaled, trying to clear my head. My body was still tense, but I managed to walk it off by the time I got back to camp. Everyone had set up their chairs around the fire. I grabbed mine, unfolded it, and sat down next to Noah. I couldn't help but scan the trees around us for any sign that thing was there. "Are you good, bro?" Noah asked. "Yeah, I'm fine, sorry," I said hastily. "He's not fine. He said he saw something in the woods. I didn't know it freaked him out this much," Henry added. "What did you see? A bear?" James inquired. "Definitely not. I think it was some kind of bird," I said in a voice that held more fear than I wanted it to. Well, we shouldn't let scary forest birds ruin our last summer trip before you all go to college and Noah and I go to the military, River said dismissively. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting hungry. I could definitely eat, James chimed in. Where do we want to go? I think there's a strip club nearby. We could get chicken strips and a lap dance. Henry laughed. I'm down with that, River replied. My girlfriend probably wouldn't like that, and I wouldn't want to keep it a secret from her. Besides, I don't really care for glitter in my food, Noah added firmly. That's fair, James said. What about this pizza place? James held up a picture of the restaurant and we all nodded in agreement. Henry's Pontiac didn't have enough room for all of us, so instead we loaded into my red pickup truck. Our vehicles had to be parked end to end, so Henry moved his car so I could pull out. He pulled in again so his car would be in front when we got back. We overindulged at dinner that night. The place was nice. A small locally owned restaurant with a friendly staff. Under the excuse, we're on vacation, let's splurge a little. We destroyed 2 large pizzas and 2 orders of breadsticks. It was good, but I felt like a disgusting greaseball afterwards. As we drove the winding path back into the campground, an overweight older woman waved at us and approached the vehicle. I stopped the car and rolled my window down. Her face was slightly red, and she wheezed a little bit as she approached. "Hello, ma'am. Can I help you?" I asked. She rested a fleshy arm on my car door, which put her closer to me than I would have liked. "I need to ask you boys a favor," she said in a voice that revealed she was a veteran smoker. "My sweet Mabel has run off from us. Could you keep an eye out for her? It's not like her to wander off." She held up her phone. There was a picture of a Shih Tzu with a bright pink collar around its neck. I moved my head so the others could see the picture. "We'll let you know if we see her. Hopefully she'll turn up soon," I told her. "Oh, thank you. My husband and I are staying in that camper there." She pointed to a noticeably large camper that barely fit in the parking space. "Please let us know if you find anything." I nodded and she turned and shuffled back towards her camper. Rolling the window up, I drove us back to our campsite. "That's too bad about the dog," James said solemnly. "Yeah, crappy place to lose a pet. She could be anywhere out there." River gestured to the forest around them. I pulled back into our parking spot and turned off the truck. The air conditioning left the vehicle quickly as the summer heat started to replace it. We looked at the campsite we left. "Crap," we said in unison. In front of us on the picnic table were 3 squirrels. They'd torn open the marshmallow bag we brought to make s'mores. The white puffs were strewn across the ground, each with little teeth marks in them. We got out, and the squirrels quickly scattered, though one decided to carry off 1 more marshmallow to go. Noah walked over and picked up the torn open bag. There was still about half a bag left. "Can we still eat these, or will we get rabies?" he asked. "I don't think that's how rabies works," River said, taking the bag from him. He picked out the ones with bite marks and tossed them on the ground. "There, now it should be fine." Noah looked at the bag as River held it out to him. "Yeah, I'm not going to take any chances." Noah held a hand up dismissively. "Baby," River taunted as he popped a marshmallow into his mouth. Noah frowned but said nothing. "Why don't we chill around the fire a little bit?" I said to change the subject. We all agreed and gathered around the campfire. I took a seat facing the woods. The sun was setting and the darkness was beginning to envelop the trees. The unsettling thought that anything could be out there looking back at me seeped into my mind. I shivered and shook it from my head. It wasn't productive to worry about what I can't see or control. "Focus on what you can control," my parents would tell me when I started to worry. I needed to remember that. We talked for a while around the fire, circling around topics of women, our futures, and past memories. It hit us that this would be one of the last times we would be together. We'd known each other since kindergarten, and watched each other grow up. I felt a twist of cold sadness coil in my stomach. "I don't think I'm ready to leave you guys," I said in a squeakier voice than I wanted. We can still stay in contact with each other. It won't be the same, but we can still talk," said Henry. James nodded. "You guys can reach out anytime. I'll try to check in weekly with you all." "Me too," Noah added. "I'm not sure how much I'll be able to talk after I get with the army, but I'll try to reach out when I can." River popped a zin as he said that. "I've been really fortunate to have you guys in my life." A tear fell from my eye, but I quickly wiped it away before anyone noticed. "I'm gonna miss you guys so much." "We had a really good run, though," James exclaimed, adopting a more positive tone. "Sure did," River smiled. "We get to make something of ourselves now. Be real men." Henry cheered. "That's right," Noah agreed. He stood up and grabbed 5 Mountain Dews from the cooler and passed one to each of us. "Cheers to our future," he yelled. "Cheers," we shouted in unison. My God, was it corny, but it lifted our spirits and the cold twist in my stomach lightened. It was now around 9:30 p.m. I excused myself from the restroom. I figured it was good to find the bathroom now so I wouldn't be searching for it in the middle of the night. In the distance, I heard the old woman who approached us earlier still shouting in the dark for Mabel to come back. Her voice was hoarse and weak even for a smoker. It was apparent that the poor woman hadn't stopped looking for the dog since the interaction they had with her. I walked the dirt trail to the restroom. It was a little off the path, but not by much. I could still see tents and campers through the trees. I walked into the men's room, and it was surprisingly clean. There were 2 urinals and 3 stalls. I found the stall furthest from the door and did my business. As I was about to open the stall door, I heard a bang on the door to the restroom entrance that made me pause for a moment. I listened. Silence. I finally exited the stall to see what made the noise. Approaching the entrance door, I put my hand on the handle when another hard bang rattled it. I felt the vibration of the strike travel from the door and up my arm. I let go of the handle and backed away. Whoever was on the other side was strong. Really strong. Another bang struck the door, and then another. How did they not know how to use a door? I thought. Were they drunk? The bangs only intensified. It was like a heavyweight boxer was trying to punch down the door. The noise fell into a rhythm. There was a clear and brief wind-up between each strike. "What do you want?" I finally gathered the courage to ask. Whoever was outside went crazy at that. The banging on the door became rapid, harsher and louder than ever. Then I watched the door handle jiggle. It turned down slightly and then straight up before being violently shaken. At that, I rushed back to the stall and locked myself in. For the first time, I thought it possible that the thing outside was not a who, but rather a what. The handle jostled a couple more times before I heard the door open slightly and then close again. Another bang struck the door before the handle jostled again. It wasn't long before I heard the door open again. This time it didn't close. I pulled my legs up off the floor and held my breath. I heard every beat of my heart in my ears. The door was pushed roughly against the wall with a loud clang. Instead of swinging back and latching, it thunked against something that prevented it from shutting. I heard dainty tapping footsteps on the concrete just outside the door. With a slow creak, the door was pushed open more. The creature I saw back in the woods came back to my mind. Whatever was entering the restroom at the moment did not seem remotely human, but also behaved like no animal I've ever heard of. I then thought about that missing dog and the possibility that she didn't run off. These thoughts swirled in my mind and caused my heart to pound harder against my rib cage. I heard a clacking sound like 2 pieces of wood being tapped lightly together. What was this thing? What was it doing? I didn't know, and I didn't care. I just didn't want it to find me. There was silence for about half a minute. Then the sound of something slowly sliding against the open door reached my ears. Then the door clicked shut again. It was maybe 15 minutes of silence before I gathered the courage to unlock the stall and walk out. It was another 5 minutes before I opened the door to the outside. I imagined some giant monster waiting outside to grab me the moment I walked out. But that's not what happened. I opened the door and immediately saw the peppering of dents covering it. It looked like someone had taken a hammer to it in a fit of rage. I looked over at the entrance to the women's restroom. It was entirely untouched. The possibility that that thing had stalked me on my walk and to the bathroom hit me. There was a reason why the girls' room was untouched. It had tried to follow me when I entered the bathroom. It was hunting. I wondered how close it got to me, and I didn't even know. I looked around. There was no sign of whatever just attacked the door. I inhaled and then immediately bolted back toward our camp. My legs felt like rubber, and my pace felt like the slowest I've ever run. On my way back, I heard someone calling out the name Michael. Has another dog gone missing? I couldn't worry about it. I needed to get my friends and myself out of here as soon as possible. As I ran back to camp, I realized the silver Pontiac was gone. I'd left the keys in the truck, so they must have moved it out of the way so they could get out. I prayed that Henry and River decided to go home, or were called back by their family. I ran up to the camp. James and Noah were sitting around the fire. "He's back," James said with a smirk. "We thought you'd fallen in." Noah laughed. I ignored what they were saying. "Guys, we have to leave right now," I said as I started grabbing stuff and putting them messily into a bag. Whoa, whoa, we have this place booked until Sunday morning. Why do you want to leave?" Noah protested. "You don't understand. There is something here hunting us. It tried to attack me in the bathroom and probably ate that lady's dog." I yelled in a panic. A worried look covered James' face. "Dude, you're scaring me. Are you okay?" "I saw it when I grabbed your stupid fire starter. I should have trusted myself and left then," I rambled. "We can't just leave. Henry and River are still here," Noah pointed out. I paused. "What?" "Yeah, they went to search the trail near the visitor center. There's some kid missing. I think his name is Miguel or something," James explained. "Michael," Noah corrected. Dread reached its claws into my stomach and twisted it into a knot. Call them right now. Get them out of there," I screamed. Okay, James said, pulling out his phone. He clicked Henry's contact and the phone rang, and rang, and rang. After each ring, I hoped to hear Henry's voice on the other end, but there was nothing. The call went to voicemail. He tried to call River. Same thing. "They must have no service," James declared. I paused and breathed, trying not to panic more than I already was. Every part of me wanted to pack up and leave. James and Noah could stay or go if they wanted, and I'd be back home in a couple of hours. But I couldn't leave them behind. What would I tell their parents if something happened? I sighed. "We need to go get them," I said, trying to gain control of myself. James and Noah were hesitant to go and still looked worried about me. However, they still loaded into the truck and we drove the path to the visitors center. The parking lot was almost empty, all except an empty silver Pontiac parked near the trail entrance. We got out and faced the trail. It was so dark that the trail's entrance looked like some kind of abyssal void to hell. We turned on our flashlights and in a single file entered the trail. Noah went in first and I was in the back. Every corner of the woods seemed to move. Branches waved in the wind, bushes shook, twigs snapped. Every noise and movement put me further on edge. There were large, uneven stones that created a rough stairway down into a steep ravine. We traversed them carefully, trying not to twist an ankle. The trail widened at the bottom. We kept on walking until suddenly the temperature of the air dropped dramatically. It was cold and damp. "What is that?" James whispered. "Not sure," I whispered back. Noah took a few steps to the side and shone his flashlight around. "There." He flashed his light on a sign that read, "Cave Entrance," with an arrow pointing to a narrow trail that split off and descended further downward. The main trail continued and started to ascend back up the ravine. Just then, a voice came from the trail leading to the cave entrance. "Michael!" It was Henry. He was close. "Henry! River!" James shouted. "James?" River shouted back. Yeah, get up here. A slight relief came over me with the fact that they were both alive. Through the trees, we saw their distant flashlights moving closer. The two of them jogged up the trail until they caught up with us. "Did you find the boy?" asked Noah. Henry shook his head. "No luck. We'll have to keep looking." "No," I yelled. River and Henry looked surprised. "There's some kind of monster here. It tried to attack me while I was in the restroom. I'm guessing it took that dog, and I wouldn't be surprised if the boy was gone too. We need to leave." "A monster like that thing you saw earlier today?" Henry asked. "Yes, and don't try to convince me I'm imagining things. I could never imagine this." "Okay, well, you've at least spooked me, and I'd like to get out of this forest now," Henry replied. "Let's go back that way then. We can get in our cars and go back to camp," River said, pointing in the direction we came. He led the way back through the path, and we filed in behind him. We eventually came upon the same stone steps as before, when at the top, a putrid odor hit my nose. It smelled like crap. I wasn't going to ask anyone about it. I just wanted to get out. It could have been a number of animals that left it. Nobody else mentioned the smell either. We'd all been exposed to livestock before, so we were very accustomed to unpleasant smells, and they likely thought nothing of it. However, as I passed my flashlight over the trail, I found the source of the smell, and I stopped as the rest of the group continued. It was a pile of dung, but it was larger than any dog could leave. Most unsettling of all was the frayed pink dog collar sticking out of its side. "Guys, I don't know if we should continue this way," I called out to them, but they were already stopped about 20 feet ahead of me. I jogged up to them to see what was going on. "Holy," I heard River mutter. I looked over them to see why they've stopped. The scene was brutal. Blood splattered the trail ahead of them, still shining crimson red. It was fresh. There were organs strewn around too. I saw a liver, stomach, pieces of intestines thrown about like silly string, and what I think was a kidney. The victim, a female deer, lay just a few feet in front of us. The front half of her body was concealed by the off-trail vegetation. Her abdomen was torn open and entirely hollowed out. "Did you see this on your way here?" Henry's voice quivered. "No," James whimpered. It's here, I know it is," I cried out. Panic had set in, and I didn't know if I should run or curl up in a ball and pray it doesn't find us. "Shut up," River hissed. "If there's something here, all that noise is going to get its attention." I moved my flashlight around frantically, but saw nothing in the darkness and thick vegetation. I stopped to listen. There was no sound. No birds, no crickets chirping. Nothing. Then I saw it. Ahead of us, up a small hill about 50 feet off the trail, it showed its head, peeking its long neck around one side of a tree. Its eyes, shining white from the flashlight, were locked on them. It bobbed its head from one side of the tree to the other. A long pointed beak, about the size of a man, extended from its face. It had the same hair or stringy feathers I'd seen before. A blocky red crest sat above the eyes. Ice blasted through my veins. It was going to kill us. I knew it. The misfortune was almost laughable. We're out in the one place and one time that this awful unknown creature exists. I heard James yell as he noticed the creature too. Everyone pointed our flashlights at the thing. We held our breath and didn't dare to move. For a long time, we sat there watching this thing swing its head from one side of the tree to the other. Then it took its first step towards us. A long and lanky front leg moved forward slowly. It had a long finger that curled back and stuck straight up. It craned its neck down as it tediously moved like a cat stalking its prey. It eventually emerged from its concealments. The proportions of its body seemed entirely wrong. A giant head, long neck, spindly legs with the front being longer than the back. Its chest was shallow and frail-looking. Whatever this was, it was not of this world, or had not been for a long time. It continued to creep forward until it was about 20 feet from us. To our horror, its cautious steps quickened into an unsightly gallop. It raced towards us. We scattered in two ways. Henry and I moved back a few feet into the trail, while the other three ran in the direction of the parking lot. I turned around and watched the creature catch James by the foot with its beak. He gasped and fell onto the trail. He tried to get up, but the monster smacked him with its beak, knocking him onto his back. Like a swing of a pickaxe, it brought its head up and plunged its pointed beak into his abdomen. With a swift motion, it pulled back and a string of James' intestines came with it. Surprisingly, James didn't scream. A look of panicked horror painted his face. He whimpered and tried to push himself away from the beast. It was horrible to watch. The tragedy of an animal trying to survive, even when there was no hope, unfolded before my eyes. I'm sad to say it, but at that moment, all I wanted was for James to die so he wouldn't suffer anymore. The monster tore off a piece of intestine and swallowed it whole. It noticed James' slow and desperate crawl away and craned its neck down towards him. It made 2 strikes in the blink of an eye. Both hit James in the throat just below the chin. His body fell, blood poured from his neck and out of his mouth. His eyes glossed over and I knew he was gone. The monster stood over my lifeless friend. Henry and I had stopped running long ago. How could we continue after what we just saw? The scene before us was entirely unreal. Suddenly a shot rang out and that thing made the most terrible sound I've ever heard. It started low as a deep, throaty gurgle, but then crescended rapidly into a shrill, ear-piercing screech. Another shot rang out and the creature screamed again. It turned and galloped toward the parking lot, limping painfully as it moved. I watched River and Noah jump to the side of the trail out of its way. It didn't even look at them. Instead, it kept running down the trail. Henry and I rushed over to them, running past James' deceased body. We hurriedly pulled Noah and River to their feet. "Get to the cars," River screamed, gun in hand. "Run." Racing down the trail, we prayed that the beast wouldn't jump out at us from the trees. It wasn't long before we got back to where we entered the trail. We stopped. That thing was in the parking lot, as if it couldn't get any more horrific. I watched as it took a running leap and threw itself into the air. Its 4 legs opened into the largest pair of wings I've ever witnessed. From end to end, I guessed its wings were the width of a school bus. It took to the air but flew low. It tried to flap its wings, but its flaps were uneven, and the monster crashed to the ground near our cars with a pained wail. As it got up on its stick-like legs, I noticed a large bloodstain on its shoulder. It stood up, limping worse than before. It moved in anguish into the trees in front of our vehicles and disappeared. The 4 of us exchanged looks and bolted for our cars. I threw open the door to my truck and jumped in and slammed the door shut. Noah scrambled into the passenger seat. I watched River enter the passenger side of Henry's Pontiac. Henry threw open the door to the driver's seat but then stopped. The monster was back, standing almost over him. It plunged its beak down. The glass of the driver's window shattered as the creature's head plowed through it. It recoiled and shook its head. Henry took off back towards the trail entrance. The beast gave chase, slower and with a pained limp. It was still fast enough to start closing in on Henry. I exhaled sharply. I wasn't going to let another person die tonight. I turned to Noah. "Get in Henry's car." "What? Are you crazy?" he yelled. "Now." Noah scrambled quickly into Henry's car while keeping an eye on the monster at all times. He got in and shut the door. I threw the truck in reverse and pointed the front end at the creature chasing Henry in front of the tree line. I slammed on the gas and the truck rocketed forward. I felt the front end slam down roughly as it left the pavement and fell onto the grass. The monster turned its head. Seeing the large vehicle barreling towards it, it left Henry and tried desperately to hobble away in the opposite direction. It wasn't fast enough. I turned the wheel sharply and caught the beast. It fell hard on the front end of the truck and fractured my front window. Then, with a loud bang, my truck collided with the solid trunk of a tree. My airbag deployed, which sent me roughly back into my seat. As it deflated, I exited the car. My chest was painfully bruised. My nose was bleeding and my head rang like a bell. I turned and looked at the damage. The front end of my vehicle was horribly damaged. It looked like it was trying to engulf the tree. Between the tree and the truck was the creature, horribly broken but still lashing what little parts it could move. One wing was crushed between it and the truck. The other stuck out at an odd angle and gave jerky movements. Its neck bent over loosely and its head hit the crumpled hood of the truck, blood pooling from its mouth. It opened and closed that terrible beak, but no sound came out. Its chest, lungs, and lower body were crumpled somewhere in the wreckage. As I watched its eyes blink and free wings flutter weakly, I was reminded of how James died. I found myself pitying the thing for a brief moment before I pushed the feeling away. It didn't feel right to give this thing the same emotion I'd given James. Henry, Noah, and River ran up to me shouting things I couldn't understand. My ears were ringing too loudly to hear anything. The last thing I saw was the red and blue lights of the emergency responders before I collapsed into darkness. I woke up in the hospital the next day. I had a concussion and had broken my nose and a few ribs. It hurt like hell for a while, but it wasn't anything too severe. Strangely enough, nobody ever questioned me or anyone about the events of that night. It wasn't until much later that I learned why. They already had their story. The news reported the events of that night as a wild black bear attack. For some reason, they covered it up. James' parents were told their son was mauled to death along with a Shih Tzu and a 12-year-old boy named Michael. For now, that's the story they will believe. Henry, River, Noah, and I didn't have it in us to tell them what happened. We'd sound crazy if we did. The cover-up did not go unscrutinized, however. For one, black bears were rare, if not unheard of, around Mammoth Cave. And two, fatal black bear attacks were almost just as unheard of. People wasted no time spinning theories about what happened that night. From Bigfoot, serial killers, and wild cave people. They landed on everything but the truth. I did some research of my own. After a Google search, I learned that the thing we encountered that night was called a Quetzalcoatlus. It's some flying reptile that went extinct with the dinosaurs about 66 million years ago. I guess that needs to be updated to June 16th, 2023. I find myself pitying the monster again from time to time. I guess I should stop calling it a monster. It was a predator, an animal. One is trying to find a place in a world that has long forgotten it. It died because it had to. The earth demanded it. The environment was not made for it anymore. If it wasn't the front end of my truck that got it, it would have been the bitter winter of the Midwest, disease or starvation. What still doesn't make sense is how it got there. I don't think some magic portal opened from the late Cretaceous and this thing slipped through. I think someone made it, and by some negligence, it got out. That explains the cover-up. Someone doesn't want people to know they made this thing, and I'm going to find out who. No matter how deep, I have to dig. I've spent most of my adult life explaining complex things to people who don't want equations, which is to say I'm a scientist who learned very early how to make terrifying ideas sound harmless. When people ask me about quantum entanglement, I don't talk about mathematics or probability amplitudes. I talk about pairs. I say imagine two things that touch once, just once, and from that moment on, no matter how far apart they are pulled, they remain linked. Change the state of one, and the other responds instantly, not because anything traveled between them, but because separation was never fully achieved. The universe remembers the interaction. It does not forget. There is an older story that says the same thing in less forgiving language. Aristophanes wrote about it in Plato's Symposium, how humans were once whole beings. round and complete, powerful enough that the gods feared us. Zeus split us in half not to teach us love, but to weaken us, to make us manageable, condemning us to wander the earth longing for reunion, mistaking the pain of incompleteness for romance. People like to tell that story at weddings. They never linger on the punishment part. I didn't think either story applied to people in any literal sense until I met him. It happened once. Only once. In a church I didn't belong to, on a day heavy with license and obligation. He was older than me by decades, old enough that the attraction should have been theoretical, harmless, easily dismissed. He had a wedding ring, a family, a life already spoken for. When our eyes met, something in my body recalibrated without my consent, like a system suddenly forced into alignment, and I remember having to sit down because the floor felt unreliable beneath my feet. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. From that moment on, my life developed a background hum, a low, constant tension I couldn't trace to any immediate cause. I lived responsibly. I kept my distance. I did not pursue him. We crossed paths rarely, always accidentally, always briefly, in places that belonged to neither of us. Funerals, hospital corridors. Once, years later, a sidewalk on Valentine's Day. Couples flowing past us carrying flowers and balloons while we talked about the weather because it was the only safe thing left to say. He was careful in the way people are careful when they know exactly what they're avoiding. I was careful too, because knowledge doesn't grant permission. Entanglement doesn't require proximity. That's the part people misunderstood. Once a system has interacted, once its states have been linked, distance becomes irrelevant. You can isolate the particles, shield them, place them light years apart, and still, a change in one is reflected in the other. No signal, no delay, just correlation, persistent and absolute. The system behaves as if it resents being forced apart. I felt him in the quiet ways that don't leave evidence. Sudden calm with no explanation, sudden grief that arrived ahead of news. Nights where my body refused sleep, restless and alert, like it was waiting for something it couldn't see. Later, I would learn he'd been ill during one of those stretches, anxious during another. I stopped calling it coincidence after the pattern stabilized. This is where the horror actually begins. Though from the outside it looked like discipline, like restraint, like maturity, I maintained distance. I didn't insert myself into his life. I didn't confess anything. I didn't fracture anything fragile. But the energy had nowhere to go, so it turned inward. I became erratic in small, socially acceptable ways, obsessive about my work, detached from relationships that didn't resonate, unwilling to plan futures that extended very far. I lived as if part of me was already elsewhere, already occupied. Love that endures does not soften, it pressurizes. When he died, it was not sudden or dramatic. It was medical, expected, surrounded by people who loved him in all the ways that mattered legally and morally and publicly. I found out afterward, through careful messages and softened language, and I remember sitting very still, waiting for the pain to arrive. It didn't. What arrived instead was collapse, not grief as people understand it, not tears or anguish, but something structural giving way. The background tension vanished all at once, and with it went my orientation. It felt like losing gravity, like a constant force had been removed and nothing rushed in to replace it. For the first time since meeting him, my chest was quiet, and the quiet was unbearable. That's when I stopped living in any meaningful sense. I continued existing. I ate, I slept, I went to work. Habits are stubborn things, but I stopped investing in time. Days flattened. The future became abstract. Everything felt like an after-image, like I was moving through a world that had already finished happening. I understood, with a clarity that frightened me, why some people die shortly after their spouses do, why grandmothers fade within months of grandfathers being buried, why we frame it as romance instead of what it really is. A system, returning to equilibrium. Entangled particles tend toward the same state. When one collapses, the other follows. Not because it wants to, not because it chooses to, but because it was never designed to remain independent indefinitely. Separation holds only as long as both states are sustained. I don't miss him the way people expect. There is no sharp pain, no dramatic longing. What I miss is the tension, the pull, the proof that something in the universe was still responding to me. Without it, everything feels inert. I move, but nothing reacts. I speak, but nothing answers. The ancient Greeks weren't romantic. They were warning us. The gods didn't separate us to make love meaningful. They separated us because love that endures destabilizes systems, fractures order, makes people unreliable. Love that doesn't fade doesn't ennoble you. It erodes you quietly until you are no longer fit for the life you are expected to lead. It's Valentine's Day as I write this, and people are celebrating love like it's something that sustains you, something that keeps you alive. I know better now. Love that lasts does not sustain. It dismantles. It leaves you partially collapsed, still technically functioning, but no longer whole. I didn't start out believing I was in danger. That would have been easier. Something sharp and actionable. Something I could fight or flee from. What I felt instead was adjustment. The way systems recalibrate quietly before anyone notices anything has gone wrong. My heart rate began dropping at the same hour every night, slow and deliberate, as if it was practicing. My left hand went numb for minutes at a time, then returned to normal without explanation. I woke with bruises that didn't hurt, small and round, exactly where IV lines had once been threaded into his skin. I told myself it was stress, grief, neurology misfiring under prolonged strain. So I did what I have always done when something refuses to stay in the realm of metaphor. I measured it. I pulled his medical records. I overlaid timelines. I compared decay curves and physiological markers and found correlations that were not poetic or interpretive but statistical, repeatable, indifferent to my feelings. The closer he had come to death, the more unstable my own system became, like a coupled oscillator losing amplitude. Entangled systems resist asymmetry. They seek equilibrium, not emotionally, mechanically. That's when I stopped telling people I was grieving. I wasn't. I was drifting. The silence I felt after he died wasn't peaceful. It was alignment beginning to assert itself. Without the counterforce of his presence, my states began narrowing, my range collapsing, like a waveform being observed too closely for too long. Days feel thinner now. Time compresses around certain hours, especially the hour he died. Sometimes clocks stall. Sometimes I lose minutes standing in rooms I don't remember entering. The world hasn't become hostile. It has become precise. The calling doesn't sound like his voice. That would be kinder. It feels like pressure, like a gentle but persistent hand at my back, correcting my posture towards something inevitable. It's strongest when I'm still, when I'm not distracted by work or movement or noise. It's strongest near places where boundaries are thin, hospitals, churches, mirrors. I don't think it's asking me to die. I think it's reminding me I'm unfinished. People talk about grandmothers who die shortly after their husbands as if it's devotion, as if love carries them gently into death. They don't talk about the weeks beforehand, the confusion, the withdrawal, the way life seems to lose friction. They don't talk about the possibility that a system simply cannot sustain imbalance forever, that something ancient and impersonal begins closing the distance. I am still alive. I am still capable of writing this, but I can feel my margins shrinking, my reactions slowing, my sense of self thinning, like something is being conserved elsewhere. I don't know when the correlation will complete. I only know it will not announce itself. Systems like this never do. That's why I'm writing now. Not because I want help in the way people usually mean it, but because I need someone to know that love that endures is not benign. It is not romantic. It is not safe. It binds states together long after morality and circumstance say they should remain separate. If you feel it too, that quiet pull, that sense of responding to something you can't see, pay attention. Not everything that feels like love is meant to be survived. I don't know what the universe will ask of me next. I only know it's already started asking. Shady Palms was its name, a family-owned retirement home that had been up and running since the late 70s. It's trademarked by its vibrant colors, lush gardens, decadent food, and the pool. The old folks really liked the pool. They were also one of the few retirement homes that could boast that they own beachfront property, which plenty of residents enjoyed. Most days, you'd find folks by the sea reading a book, jogging on the shore, or falling asleep in a fold-out chair, only to be scorched by the sweltering Floridian sun. The simple pleasures of the beach aren't the only thing they offer. There's also a small recreational area where folks can read, hold clubs, play bingo, all that stuff. I'm in my early 20s and desperate for money. I figured that a place like this for a fresh medical student would be an easy way to make money. Besides, working at an assisted living place would be great on a resume. As it turns out, things got way more complicated than I expected. Not in a, I saw people I liked pass away sort of thing. When you're going into senior care, you've got to prepare to say goodbye. It's a harsh reality, but it's true. What complicated things was what came out while I worked the night shift. Something I'm still not sure what to make of. My job was the same as everyone else's when it came to senior aid. Prep the beds, clean the rooms, make sure everyone is comfortable, and so forth. The late shift is a position that everyone was expected to do at least once every few weeks. It was just a daily rotation of who was unlucky enough to stay up and deal with some of the old folks. It'd be 2 people in the reception area, awaiting any late-night calls or, God forbidden, emergencies. Most of the time, it was just staying up late until the morning staff dismissed you. Since we've got a pretty big staff, I can say that I've only ever been on late shift twice during my time there. I never minded it, and from how people grumbled about it, you'd think they'd been in a war. Waste of time, a guy named Will told me. All they do is sleep, so let's let them sleep. Then, when our boss, an authoritative figure by the name of Beulah, heard his little spat, she promptly fired him. She had zero tolerance for staff who had disdain for their job. Beulah was a sweetheart when I worked under her, but she ran a very tight ship. Her reasoning is understandable. Her grandfather was in a senior home before he passed, and it wasn't until they examined the body that they found the bruises all over his legs and back. Evidently, one of the orderlies had a disdain for him due to his wetting the bed, and promptly beat him with his own cane. If there's even the tiniest bit of resentment from one of the orderlies, she nips it in the bud, and I honestly don't blame her. It was Sunday when I got the call that I'd be covering the late shift for this week, but this time around, I'd be doing it alone. Evidently, Greg, whose name was drawn for tonight, was down with the flu. Nobody else could fill in due to other obligations, which was just a vague excuse not to work the late shift. I didn't mind, though. I just got a small stack of books for the coming week to keep myself entertained. I'd watch stuff on my phone, but I don't want to wake anyone up, and I don't want to put in headphones either, because what if someone calls the desk in the middle of the night? I wasn't taking any chances. I had taken with me Demeter by Blatty, Weaver World by Barker, The Orchard Keeper by McCarthy, and, most ironically, Night Shift by King. As for drinks, I got a pack of cold brew iced coffees, the tall ones in cans. Night 1 wasn't anything special. Got 2 calls. One from Herschel McCoy, complaining about Thomas Hatfield's TV being too loud. So I played mediator and tried to get them both to come to an agreement. After that petty squabble, they were silent for the rest of the night, thankfully. Night 2 was when it started. I was halfway through Demeter when I got sleepy. I rubbed my eyes and lay my head down over the desk. I heard waves lapping outside, rising and crashing. I don't know how long I was out, but I was suddenly jolted awake by a phone call coming from Maud Wells. I know we're meant to be fair and kind to the folks who stay here, but Maud was such a gigantic B-word. She wouldn't admit it, but I think that even Beulah hated her. I creased the page and laid the book down. I braced my ears for shouting, and I picked up the phone. "Hello, Mrs. Wells? Is everything all right?" There was nothing at first. I waited for a response and I thought that maybe she had just accidentally called me. I was about to hang up when her shrill voice spoke up in a whisper. "Claire." "Yes?" "There's someone in my room." Now, mind you, I've been at the front desk this whole time and saw no one enter or leave. Also, I didn't think I was asleep so long that someone could have just snuck in. Yet, I'd never heard her sound this nervous. When she spoke, and she spoke often, she would talk loud and slow, as if accosting a rude child. This time, she was timid and somewhat frightened. Before I could say anything, she said with a quivering voice, "It looks like you." "I'm sorry?" "This person looks... oh my God." "Mrs. Wells, are you feeling nauseous or having any headaches?" "Claire," she said in a hoarse whisper, "just come in here, please." I hung up the phone and ran to her room. Her room is on the far side of the building, so I was sprinting towards her. As I stomped down the halls, I heard a brief scream followed by a sickening noise, like a pound of flesh getting tenderized by a hammer. Thump. I pushed on until I reached the room, and that's when I saw something run out into the hall. It looked like a person was sprinting out of there. They slid on the floor before they quickly got back to their feet. They were wearing nothing but black clothes from head to toe. "Hey!" I shouted, but they were already gone by the time I reached the corner of the hall. It's like when they turned right, they just vanished. I ran back to her room and flicked on the lights. To say I was shocked was an understatement. Her eyes were swollen shut, like there were 2 oversized grapes over her eyes. Fresh blood splattered her pillow, and her nose was bent in a position that didn't seem possible. She was gargling blood while she was gasping for air. "Can't see. Claire? I can't see." I called 911 immediately and alerted the other staff about what happened. I, as well as the other staff, was pretty shaken up after the whole thing. The police took notes, got interviews, and even reviewed security footage. They saw the same person dashing from Mrs. Wells' room, but it was all blurry. Shady Palms may be up to date with most of our equipment and technology, but unfortunately the one thing we needed to update was our cameras. We had only a handful, and they hadn't been changed out since the mid-2000s. Say what you will about VHS, but they were at least clear, as fuzzy as it might be. The early digital cameras that we had were absolutely abysmal in terms of quality. There was just a black blurb moving from hallway to hallway. They never got footage of where it went. The police stayed for the rest of the day to investigate the area, looking for any and all pieces of evidence they could gather. Sadly, the only piece of DNA they could find was Mrs. Wells' own blood. I was called in for questioning that morning, and they assured me it was just a formality. I had a rock-solid alibi, and the cameras backed it up. When I returned home, I blacked out and didn't dream. I was awoken by an alarm that read, "Night shift." I groaned and called Beulah, and despite understanding why I might be hesitant to return to Shady Palms, but told me. Imagine what it must be like for them. Someone attacked Maud in the middle of the night, and you expect them to get a good night's rest? I know you're just one person, but sometimes one person can make all the difference. I hated the idea of going in, but she had a point. Night 3 was thankfully a night of peace. No calls, no disturbances, and no random attackers prowling in the rooms at night. I was too scared to pick up a book, and I just downed 3 cans of the iced coffee to make it through the night. I kept snapping my gaze back and forth around me, trying to spot something, anything out of the ordinary. I fell asleep in the last hour, and I know that we were indoors, but I could still hear the sound of the waves rising and crashing. It was a soothing noise to fall asleep to. They found me slumped over the desk, my hair clinging to a pool of spit. It wasn't the best look. "Morning, Claire," Vic told me. He was someone my age, a very mellow guy by all means. "Hey," I said in my slurred, drowsy sleep. "Anything happen?" "No, thank Christ above, no." Vic took in a deep breath, and I looked up to see that he had a very troubled expression. "Good. Beulah got a call last night from the hospital. Maud died." I had grievances against Maud, sure, but she didn't deserve that. In that moment, I had a whirlwind of emotions that I couldn't process properly. I just nodded and grabbed my things. Vic tried to comfort me, but I waved him off. "I'm fine. I just need a good sleep before my next shift, okay?" "I'll see you next time, Claire." I drove home, and when I showered, all of the emotions I'd bottled up just exploded. I just started crying, and I couldn't stop. I felt a tremendous black pit in my stomach, and guilt was eating away at me like cancer. I dried myself off and took 2 anxiety tablets before bed. Like the previous day's sleep, there were no dreams. Night 4 was busy, but thankfully not in a dangerous way. I went door to door checking on everyone, and they all thanked me. After what happened to Maud, I thought they'd surely turn against me. Herschel McCoy even pulled me aside and reassured me. "It's okay, honey. That wasn't your fault. I'm sure the police will get that guy. You're doing your best." I thought I could make it to the end, but the drowsiness of the night shift got to me again, and I ended up falling asleep. I heard the same sound of the waves rising and falling on the shore. I was starting to enjoy the night shift again despite it all. I'm woken up by Wanda, one of the more reserved members of Shady Palms. She usually sticks to cleaning and leading the yoga sessions on weekends. She touched my shoulder, and I stirred awake. "Wakey, wakey," she said. I looked around, seeing the early morning sunrise flood the hallways with brilliant oranges and yellows. "Eventful shift?" I chuckled at that. I got up to stretch and felt my bones pop in my back. Ugh, I need my bed. "I bet. Say, you should have wiped off your boots before doing your walkabouts. You track sand and mud all over the place." I rubbed the crust out of my eyes and said, "I ain't wearing boots." "Oh yeah? Well, the tracks lead all the way back to..." She stopped talking. I looked back at her to see that her skin was turning pale. "What?" I asked. But she just backed away from me and looked at the marble flooring. The oversized, muddy boot prints were right behind where I was sleeping. I shot up in terror, feeling ice coursing through my veins. I stared at the dried boot prints that caked the floor. Our eyes trailed the tracks all the way back to Herschel's room. "Oh God," I whimpered. We both ran to the room, and when we flung open the door, I was hopeful in the first few seconds of entering the room, because it looked like Herschel simply fell over onto the floor and spilled something dark next to him. I didn't even notice how ghostly white he was. When blood is undisturbed and still, it looks almost black. When Wanda tried to pull him up to his feet, that's when it all hit me at once. The blood finally smeared, displaying a rich red color beneath the puddle of darkness, and then the air suddenly smelled of pennies. Then there was, of course, Herschel himself. He had a concave hole where his face should be. The only thing protruding out was his lower jaw. Everything was sunken in and twisted. It was like a fleshy chalice that held blood. The police were called in again, and it was the same story as last time. The only difference this time is the boot prints. And when they went to check the cameras this time, they only found that one was working. The one overlooking the front desk. One of the officers pulled me aside and told me what I had heard before I fell asleep. I said I only heard the ocean waves crashing against the shore, rising and falling, nothing else. He looked at me quizzically and pinched his brow. "Makes no sense," he said. He cleared his throat and sat down next to me while he pulled up his laptop. He wrapped his arms around me, and for a second, I thought this might have been some sort of attempt at flirting, but I soon realized that he was bracing me for what I was about to see. "This is the security camera overlooking you most of the night," he said. He fast-forwards through the night, seeing me wiggle around, read, and walk about during the camera's feed. But he then stops when I start to fall asleep. Something walks into frame, a figure wearing all black, including a pair of boots. It walked behind me, tracking mud and sand behind it. Then it stopped, looming over me, like it was observing me. Then it turned to the camera. I know that our security camera's quality isn't the best, but I know what I was looking at. I saw my own face staring back at me, a warped version of it, with a garish grin that exposed all of her teeth, like a toddler learning to smile for the first time for a picture at school. Its arms were dangling beside it like pendulums, and at the end of each one were two meaty, man-like hands. When it turned away from the camera, it ran towards what I'm assuming is Herschel's room, and was gone for only a few minutes. This thing did all of this horrible stuff in just a few minutes. It returned to the camera, holding its hands up like a surgeon who just sterilized himself. Shiny blood coated the massive hands, and with a silent glance to the camera, it walked out of the building. Police said they'd look into the killer, put up signs online using the footage they gathered, and tried to enhance it as best as they could. Beulah ran to me after the police left to check if I was okay. I was not, but I was handling it. She gave me a big hug and told me that I wouldn't be alone tonight, because she was staying with me. She looked around the room at the staff and cops going about their business, and she pulled me in close, telling me, "I'll bring a gun tonight. If this thing comes back, I'll blow its brains out. No one messes with us." I went home and slept. This time around, I did have dreams. I was walking the halls, and then I was watching myself sleep. I started to feel a tinge of panic, and when I tried to breathe through my mouth, it was hard. It felt strange. All I could do was breathe through my nose, inhaling and exhaling. I thought it sounded familiar, almost like waves crashing, rising and falling, inhaling and exhaling. I walked to Maud's room and saw her lying asleep. I looked in the mirror and saw my face, but not the one that I'm used to. This was something different. This was the version of my face I saw in the camera. My teeth were stuck in a perpetual grin, and all I could do was weep. I heard a voice from behind me say, "Who's there?" I turned around to see Maud looking at me with confusion, and as she put on her glasses, her expression changed into fear. She grabbed the phone and began to dial. I shook my head and tried to tell her not to call anyone, but I couldn't speak. "Claire, there's someone in my room. It looks like you." I ran to her, pleading with her to hang up, waving my hands to her, but she was about to scream, so I tried to cup my hand over her mouth. But with these monstrous hands, I ended up maiming her. I slapped my palm over her face to quiet her, but I ended up breaking her nose. She shrieked and I panicked. I just wanted to knock her out, but it only made things so much worse. So I decided that maybe I should stop her suffering. But before I could do anything, I heard footsteps reaching me, and I ran out to the hall. When I turned the corner, I was back in the lobby, looking at myself sleeping. This time, I looked at myself for only a second, and I ran out of the building and trudged through the sand and mud to get to my car. But as soon as I touched the handle, I found myself back in the lobby once more. It was some sort of freakish loop. I saw myself sleeping peacefully, and looked down at my boots to see the mud clinging to them. and when I looked at the camera watching me, an intense disgust washed over me, like a putrid form of deja vu. Before I could gather myself, I heard a voice cry out from behind me. "Claire? Hello?" said Herschel. He got up from his bed and peered out into the halls, and my gaze met his. "Jesus Christ, it's back," he said. He dashed back into his room and I chased after him. I wasn't the killer. It was a misunderstanding. I entered his room and saw that he was pressing the 9 for 911 and I panicked. I seized him and threw him to the ground with a greater force than I imagined. He went face first into the tiled floor, and I heard the muffled crunch of his face. I grabbed him and tried to see if he was all right, but the damage was done. Warm blood flowed down my hands. I walked out of the room, holding my hands up, feeling the blood flow onto my clothes, but none of it dripped onto the floor. I glanced at the camera for only a moment, and then I fled outside. This, of course, was in vain. I returned to the lobby. This time was different. I saw myself sleeping, but Beulah was there next to me. She was awake and reading a magazine. I took shallow, panicked breaths as I backed away in silence. But Beulah turned around and looked at me with utter horror. I held my hands up, still slicked with fresh blood, and tried to calm her. "What are you?" she screamed. "Claire, wake up!" I did not move from the desk, and in her desperation, Beulah pulled out her pistol that she kept in her purse. She pointed it, and I lunged at her to take the gun away. As soon as the gun went off, I got a phone call that brought me out of slumber. I awoke soaked in sweat. My room was freezing. My clothes clung to me, and I heard the thundering sound of my phone vibrating on my bedside table. I saw that my room was illuminated by the dark reds of the setting sun. I looked at the rumbling phone and saw it was Beulah's caller ID. I picked it up with a trembling hand and answered. Yes? You ready for the night shift, Claire?" Hey everyone, and welcome to another 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads. I hope you all enjoy them. Tonight we have 10 stories in total. This one is an especially good lineup, so I hope you all enjoy them as much as I did. If you do enjoy, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 1 likes on this video. It would mean a lot to me. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. I post videos just like this all of the time. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. It's been about 7 months since I signed my year-long lease for this crappy apartment. I don't think I'll be making it another 5 months. I'm not sure if I'll even make it another night. My cheapness might have cost my life. I was going to make this a short cry for help before I remembered that no one would ever believe me, and it would be too late anyway. Hell, I wouldn't believe this if I stumbled across it. I'll just take my time here and pour my heart out. 7 months ago, I made what I now realize was the worst decision of my life. I moved into this dumpy apartment building after finally making the move out of my hometown. I had romanticized the idea of escapism so much. I pictured myself in New York City or something like that, walking down the sidewalk with some overpriced coffee in my hands and my tasteful messenger bag slung over my shoulder. I'd be walking to somewhere idyllic, maybe a get-together with new friends that took an interest in me or something like that. I never made it too far into that daydream. I just wanted to get out of that little rural town. It was one of those towns that was just a road with a bunch of sad old signs along it, blown out buildings with occasional passing silhouettes that were once somebody's. Let's just say I couldn't afford New York City, but I could afford a small city a few hours from that rotting place of a town. It's a city with some high-rises and skyscrapers, but nothing that's going to put it on somebody's road trip. It's a pretty lonely place, honestly. It's old and tired like my hometown, but in a more industrial way. Walkability isn't much of a reality here, unless you want to take your chances with the harsh weather or the rampant mugging. So there went my sidewalk daydream. Still, I wanted to make the most of the experience. I got an apartment right downtown for a reasonable price and figured life would improve from there on. However, I failed to truly grasp how much of a piece of crap the apartment was until I moved in. I was a little too naive at the time to understand the spectrum of stress caused by a landlord special. The doorknobs would come right off, the fridge never fully shut, the toilet wouldn't flush without some sacred jiggling sequence, and a whole mess of other inconveniences or hazards. This apartment also had a lot of strange features. The floor plan doesn't make much sense, and anyone with a shred of interior design knowledge, or even just self-respect, would have immediately crossed this place off their list. I was so desperate, though, that I didn't mind when I entered the apartment and just saw a hallway full of closed doors. I shrugged off how strange it was that each room was contained behind one of those doors, with none of the rooms connecting to one another. The kitchen is its own closed-off room, the living room too. The only way to get anywhere in the apartment was to take the central hallway. It honestly looks like one of those hallway chase shots in Scooby-Doo or something. For how awful the place is, it's not small. There are a good amount of rooms, and I actually hadn't been able to fill one particular room until recently. When you walk into the place, there's the long hallway and then 9 doors in total. There's 4 on the left side, 4 on the right, and 1 at the very end of the hallway. On the right side, the doors in order are the living room, a closet, then my bedroom, and then the bathroom. On the left side, it starts with a kitchen, then another closet, the dining room, and a second bedroom. The 9th door in the middle is that extra room. I barely had enough stuff just to fill the other rooms, and I lacked any sort of motivation to do anything with the extra room for a while. I have a corner unit, so all the rooms on the right side of the apartment have windows, as well as the extra room. The extra room has these neat casement windows that I like to look out of, but offer little privacy. I had thought to make the extra room a sort of reading area, or a home theater type deal, but I was flat broke. The extra room is strange. It's really big and open. It feels like an apartment of its own. One night, I was in there just looking out the other surrounding high-rises when I noticed a light switch that had been painted over right next to the window. I didn't think much of it. It was clearly just another amenity of my crap-hole apartment. I left it alone. As time went on, I found myself in that extra room most nights just looking out the window. I didn't have the money for any fancy streaming services, nor friends to leech off of, so I just looked out that window most nights. It was peaceful, and at night the city looked bigger and more lively. I loved seeing all the different lights, the blurry shapes of people in their own world watching their TV or making dinner. It didn't take long for me to start picking at that point on that hidden light switch as I watched the world wind down every night. I'd chip away at the paint little by little with my finger while I was lost in my thoughts. It took a few days to make any sort of progress, but eventually I had peeled off enough paint to see the light switch. It was a different color than the new plain white paint that covered everything else. It was bronze, and the switch itself was almost antique looking. It got me wondering how old this building was. A few nights later, the old switch was finally uncovered. It caught the light in an intoxicating way, and I flipped the switch on and off a few times to see if it still worked and what it controlled. Nothing changed. The next night brought a heavy snowstorm. It was beautiful, and you already know I was set up at that window staring out at the world as the brilliant snow fell. At some point, I was reminded of the bronze light switch and I flicked it, not remembering if I'd already tried it the night before. Nothing changed. I absent-mindedly flicked it again and noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye. A light turned on in the building across the street. It was the rightmost room on the top floor of the neighboring high-rise, which was quite a bit taller than my building. At first, I just thought it was something new to look at. My hand still on the switch, I craned my neck up and leaned in to watch the new light. I lost concentration and flicked the switch down, and the room's light turned off. That caught my attention. I looked down at the switch and back up at the now dark pane of glass. I flipped the switch up, and at that exact moment the room's light turned back on. I continued doing this for probably 5 minutes, just flipping the switch on and off and watching as the faraway room's light perfectly matched. The snow began falling even more, and I could still make out the light turning off and on with every flick of the old switch. I was baffled before too long, so baffled that I went right to sleep, convinced I was deprived of logic and reasoning. The next night came and, at first, I was definitely reluctant to mess with that switch or to even go in that room. I tried staring out other windows, but they were cloudy with trapped moisture. I remember thinking I should get a cat or something before I finally caved and walked into the extra room. There was traffic on the street below from some accident that night, and it provided me with enough entertainment to remain distracted from what happened the night before. The standstill row of gray cars could only stimulate me for so long before I was looking at that switch again. I flipped it. Such a harmless action, and so quick, too. Flipping a light switch, usually done by second nature. What's the harm in it? Why did flipping that switch feel so important? The same room from the night before lit up. It was a yellow, more vintage-looking tone of light. I tried using some beaten-up binoculars from my childhood, but all I got was a somehow fuzzier view of the room. From my vantage, I could only really see the ceiling of that mysterious place. That's gotta be an apartment, right? It looks too big to be a storage closet, too small to be anything commercial. I flipped the switch again, and the light turned off in perfect succession. Is somebody messing with me? Flip. The light came back on. How would they even orchestrate that? I sat there for a long time, repeatedly flipping the switch on and off as if the repetition of this would bring more clarity. I stood there flipping that switch on and off like I was a geriatric old man smacking a television set, hoping for a signal. The traffic jam cleared out and the streets became empty. I sat there, still as I could be, periodically flipping the switch on and off. The light synced every single time. Clearly this light switch, for some reason, was wired to that room in the building across the street. As to why, I had no earthly idea. What an expensive project. And for what? What purpose does it serve? I flipped the switch up and the light came back on. That last flip of the switch activated a sorry light bulb moment within me. What if I found a way into that room? So I waited in the bitter cold, rehearsing my moves. I had counted up from the ground and determined the room which connected to my light switch was on the 31st floor, and again it was the corner unit on the right side of the building when viewing from my apartment. I waited for someone to go in or out of the building. Finally I saw a woman with a giant coat drag her scrappy little dog towards the door. I was hesitant to actually go inside, but then I gathered some courage, walked right up to that door and casually slid through as she opened it. I had planned some elaborate cover story that my friend wouldn't answer his phone and all that, but when it came time, I just acted natural and thanked her as I entered. The walls were green and sickly looking, much like my apartment building. The elevator was questionable at best, and creaked a little too much as I stepped into it. There were 33 floors, so I was glad I had made note of the correct one. I slowly reached up and hit the circular button for the 31st floor and it flickered on, glowing with a jaundiced yellow. My hands grew clammy as the elevator ascended at a torturously slow pace. I watched the numbers rise. 11, 12, 13. This is a stupid idea, man. This is all in my head. Why am I doing this? 26, 27, 28. Is this even legal? What am I going to do exactly? The elevator finally dinged and bounced to a stop on the 31st floor before I had an actual plan. The doors were reluctant to open, and for a moment my heart sank thinking I had been trapped in there. Those silver doors creaked and warped as they moved out of the way and exposed me to another green hallway. I stepped out and turned left. I could see all the way down the long dilapidated hall, the green lights humming and buzzing. My alleged culprit was the final door on the right. It was room 3118. I sat outside the door like a maniac, just looking at it. I wondered what to do. I could barely see through the slits on the sides of the door. All I could make out was the lights were on in there. Do I knock? I looked around me and made sure the coast was clear. What the hell do I say? Maybe I'm lost. Maybe it's an honest mistake. If anyone lives in there, I'm sure they're very confused about their lights turning on and off. But why wouldn't they take control of their own lights? Maybe they can't use them, but that doesn't make any sense. Why would I be able to control their lights, but they can't? I knocked on the door and startled myself. It felt almost automatic. Unsure of what to do, I started to shuffle away and make my retreat. Then I decided to stay and wait. I waited for a few seconds. The pause was long and uncomfortable enough for my hand to instinctually rise for another round of knocking. A faint and vague sound, dampened enough to even be of my own mind, but it was the sound of dragging, or a thud of some kind with something rolling afterward. What was that? The sound might have continued, or my mind might have kept wandering. Maybe the neighbors. The walls were thin in this place. I could begin to hear indiscernible conversation somewhere down the hall. I could hear the hissing chatter of a TV show somewhere else. Underneath all that, though, in room 3118, a rolling sound still. Maybe. What is that noise? I left not long after. I was getting freaked out, and I'm sure I would have freaked out anyone living there. When I got back to my place across the street, I felt very paranoid. I felt like I was being watched. I opened the squeaky door to my apartment, and the long, dark hallway of 9 closed doors now made me nauseous with dread. I wanted to leave that apartment behind and run back into my mom's arms or something. I felt like a child. I walked in, though, and I wish I hadn't. I took a scorching hot shower. It made me feel a little better, but I was still so paranoid. I kept hearing, or thought I was hearing, similar thudding and rolling sounds in one of the other rooms. Old pipes, that's all. It took some more courage to leave the bathroom and enter the cold, dark hall. I don't know what door to go through next. The kitchen door, bedroom door, or the extra door. My stomach was in a knot, but I thought I should probably try and eat something. It was around midnight by that point, and I felt hopeless knowing there were so many more hours of dark left. I looked down at my half-eaten peanut butter sandwich, and knew this knot in my stomach wouldn't go away if I didn't have some kind of closure. I wanted to go into the extra room and turn off that switch for the night. I braved the silent hallway again, and opened up the 9th door into that grand room that turned the faintest sound into a booming echo. I walked up to the big window I always looked out of and, with great caution, looked up at room 3118. The light was still on, and there was something up there now. I couldn't tell what it was, but it looked like a big shadow. It wasn't a person, but something boxy looking. Something square or just rigid, really. Furniture? Did someone move something around in there? I didn't know what I was looking at, and I honestly didn't have the mental space to think about it much longer. I flipped off the switch. I flipped it back on. I couldn't deny my interest. I was very invested in this whole ordeal now. The rigid thing started moving. At least, I thought it looked like it was slowly changing position. It moved very smoothly and very, very slowly. It looked like it was rolling or sliding. It rolled from the right side of the window to the left. I flipped the switch here and there to see if it made any sort of difference. Didn't seem to. I watched it roll along for a few minutes from right to left until I jumped at the sight of the neighboring window's light turning on. It was whoever lived in room 3116. I saw a person moving around in there, and it looked like a more elderly man. He looked like he was listening closely to something, as if there were an intruder in his house. I didn't know what to do, but now I felt intrusive watching this man fumble around. I decided to switch the light off in 3118 and try to forget about the whole thing. I wanted to remove myself from this weird nightmare entirely. I decided that the next day, I'd try to disconnect the switch and install some curtains. Find a new hobby. That all sounded like something rooted in everyday monotony, and I let the comfort of curtain shopping lull me to sleep. In my sleep that night, I heard the sound of aggressive wind chimes far away. They weren't very melodic wind chimes, sort of just one tone and reverberated. Then I heard an awful banging sound. It was loud and most definitely not a dream. It sounded distant, but it contained a lot of power. It was 3:48 a.m. I tossed and I turned until my bedroom started flashing red. I got out of bed and tried to see what was happening outside from my bedroom window, but I couldn't see through all the gloom trapped in between the glass. I had no choice but to go into the extra room if I wanted to see outside. There was a large fire truck that was blocking off one side of the road, and police were putting up caution tape on the other. Squad cars were rolling in one after the other. A few ambulances were present too, but it seemed like no one was in a big rush. They were all circled around, their hands waving about in a casual, conversational way. At some point, one of them looked up and pointed, and the others followed along. I followed the trajectory of the gestures all the way to the 31st floor. Room 3116 was now missing its pane of glass. The curtains whipped out into the open world, the lights were still on, and I could make out vague details of the interior. Back on the ground, a few paramedics moved out of the way long enough for me to see what I was already preparing to see. The old man from room 3116 was laying there in a confusing mess of fabric, flesh, and bones surrounded by a growing puddle of blood. I was shocked. What the hell is going on? What did I do? Am I losing my mind? Did I inadvertently kill that man? The next few days were a blur. My head was heavy with the endless hum of 1,000 different thoughts, all saying similar things. I felt an immense weight of guilt, even though there was nothing tangible that connected me to the old man's plunge. In my head, there was an ever-growing web of continuity. I uncovered the old switch. I flipped it incessantly, and, in doing that, I created or resumed something. That something looked like a giant rectangle that rolled around and made a man jump to his death, or maybe it pushed him out by force. But why? None of this makes any sense. Maybe it's all just make-believe. I could have misunderstood what I saw. The rolling rectangle thing. Maybe it was just an illusion. That old man, maybe it's just a coincidence he chose tonight to leap. I know what I saw. I no longer was going into the extra room for any reason. The thought of that big empty space with that switch made me nauseous. I couldn't stand sleeping just a few doors away from it. I wanted to move out and get away. I should have done that. Reality doesn't make room for fiction, though. I couldn't and still can't afford to break the lease. Not by a long shot. That's 3 rent payments, and a bundle of paperwork in this godforsaken building. The apartment's obviously outdated, so I thought about making a case for lead paint or something toxic that could maybe get me out of here for free. And quick, but I'm not sure how that'd blow over. I don't even know how to go about doing something like that. I chose the route of avoidance. If I could ignore the extra room, the mystery switch, the dead man's browning blood stain on the road, and the rolling rectangle monster whose whereabouts weren't known, maybe it'd all just fade away with time. A few weeks went by and that strategy was seeming to work. Even in that short time, I was afforded some hindsight of the whole event. How I was jumping to conclusions, being paranoid, and maybe not appreciating my deteriorating vision that was probably making some serious guesswork. Still, there was no explaining away the light switch. That switch is undoubtedly connected to room 3118 across the street for some unknown reason. I must have tested it hundreds of times. I tried to not let that fact dig too deep when I couldn't sleep, or when I'd think I heard the rolling sounds across the apartment late at night. Eventually, I had saved up enough money to treat myself with some more furniture. I wanted to reclaim the extra room and make it mine. I started with a thrifted recliner and some shelves. I was planning on making it a home theater after all. I had plans to bury the big casement windows behind blackout curtains. Earlier tonight, I was moving some new finds into the home theater. The room's echo was just as booming and awful as when it was empty, and I flinched with every screech and scrape the furniture would make when I moved it. As I heaved the new TV stand around, my eyes subconsciously checked on room 3118, a reflex that must have been built into me after all those cold nights. The lights were off as I had left them the last time I flipped the switch. The lights were on in room 3116. Don't freak out. Maybe someone new moved in. I watched longer than I should have. I don't know why I'm so nosy, always trying to get to the bottom of everything. I watched and waited for any sign of movement in room 3116. I never saw a soul in there. At some point, the big coat lady came out of the building with her dog and, for some stupid reason, I felt compelled to go talk to her. I just need to be sure of something. I walked casually down the sidewalk, waiting to run into her again. I was going to ask her if she had a lighter, and then I was going to ask her if she had any information on room 3116. Eventually, she reappeared around the corner with her feisty little dog walking on its hind legs, strangling itself with the leash. I was leaned up on the wall next to the door I had snuck in weeks before, waiting to say my line. "Excuse me," I said. "Do you have a light?" She looked up with confusion. "Like a flashlight?" she asked. I flashed my carton of cigarettes. "Oh, no, honey. I've got asthma. Sorry." "No problem," I muttered back. I tried to come up with anything else I could say, so I could eventually segue into room 3116. Blanking, I simply stared ahead in disappointment. That's when I noticed the faded bloodstain on the sidewalk from the old man. I clicked my tongue. "Terrible what happened," I muttered. The big coat lady turned around and saw what I was staring at, understanding immediately. I know. I'm up on the 13th floor and I heard the sound." She was slowly nodding and now staring at the old puddle of blood herself. "I heard someone talking about how they already moved the new family into that unit he was in. Is that right?" I asked, surprising myself. "Oh, no. I think they're letting it sit like they did with the last one," she said. My brow raised. I tried to not act like an insane person and scare her off. "The last one?" I asked hesitantly. "Yeah, it was just a few months ago. Or maybe it was a year now. But the young couple that lived right next door to him jumped out the window too," she said in a flat way. I could have fainted. I felt dizzy and clammy, but I tried to keep my calm demeanor. "That is... wow. I'm pretty new to the building, so I hadn't heard," I stammered. I resigned from my niceties, and my eyes went out to focus as my mind began jumping to its newest conclusion. Somewhere in my peripheral, I noticed the lady nodding and looking down at her scraggly dog. "Well, it sure is hard out there these days," she said, breaking the silence. She shuffled through the heavy apartment door which slammed behind her, startling me. Torn from my trance, I quickly retreated back to my apartment. Crap. What does this mean? That rolling square thing lives in that room and, what, kills people in it and around it? Do the people kill themselves? Does the thing maybe inject them with something that makes them, I don't know, suicidal? Or maybe they go crazy and just jump. I was thinking like a lunatic, like one of the cracked-out vagrants wandering through the abandoned motels back in my hometown. I tried to slow myself down, but now I'd been given perfect evidence to suit my paranoid suspicions. At first, I was just trying to solve this complex series of events. Then I remembered I was involved. I remembered the switch plays a role in this whole thing. The light switch in my home theater. How far can it move? How far? Could it cross the street and climb the stairs and break in? Maybe it's quiet, or maybe it has some kind of way to silently open my door so I don't notice. So the neighbors don't notice. I found myself back in the home theater with some cheap whiskey in a plastic bottle. I sipped on it and enjoyed the aromantic sting that made me slowly feel braver with every gulp. I looked up at the 31st floor across the street. The lights were still on in room 3116. They're probably just cleaning it out. You need to calm yourself. None of this is your problem. I felt better and braver still with every new swig of the cruel whiskey. At some point, I hovered my hand over the light switch. The dwindling sobriety in me said no. The courageous, drunk in me said, I'm just curious. My sight was beginning to sharpen and blur, and I could tell I was swaying as I just stood in front of those windows. I was drunk enough to where I felt like an observer of a faded memory from the past. I was drunk enough to where any action felt insignificant, and all would be fine because nothing mattered. I flipped the switch, expecting the lights of room 3118 to blink on. The lights in room 3116 turned off instead. I don't know why, but seeing those lights turn off made me duck and hide below the window. I felt like I woke the rolling thing up, and now it could see me. It moved. It moved. Logic and reasoning was now out the window. The lights magically switched rooms, and I can only imagine it's because the square rolling thing now occupied, or will now materialize inside of room 3116. I continued hiding and thinking horrible thoughts to myself. I then did something I would have never done had I not been wasted. I grabbed a hammer and smashed the light switch. I smashed it into a million pieces and then smashed those pieces into dust. I'm sure my neighbors were fuming, but I had been quiet as a church mouse up until tonight. Both room 3118 and 3116 now had no lights on, and had made the drunken assumption that now they were both safe. This all began when I turned the lights on in 3118. Now the lights would stay off forever, and I made sure of it. Clearly, I didn't have the self-control to stop myself from tinkering with this unknown thing. I doubt anyone else who would live here would have much more discipline, so I smashed the switch into a million pieces. It wasn't long before I blacked out. Something woke me up hours later. It was deep into the night. I was still in the home theater and still drunk, but now also hungover. I tried to pull it together enough to figure out what woke me. I had thought it was a loud sound, but maybe it wasn't. The air felt like something loud had just occurred, but that was just a feeling. Maybe one of paranoia. I looked out the window and half expected to see another person or persons lying smashed on the ground after diving off the 31st floor. But I saw no such horror. Both 3118 and 3116's lights were still off. I rubbed my eyes and looked around the pitch-black room. I felt my blood freeze. There was a light on in my apartment. I could see the thin sliver of yellow illuminating underneath the door of the home theater. It's in. I wanted to run at first, but then I wanted to sit still and just listen. So I sat there, waiting for something. Maybe it was waiting for me to make a move. Then I heard it, muffled, maybe in the kitchen, rolling. Finally, I could hear the sound in finer detail. The wheels sounded heavy, like the sound of a stone tomb opening. The cheap hardwood floor buckled and cracked underneath those giant rolling wheels, which must have moved extremely slow and calculated, as if it was listening for my heartbeat. I was frozen with fear and confused. So confused. What kind of nightmare has my life become? I wanted to try and make a break for it. I thought about running as fast as I could down my awful hallway and ripping that front door open. It was only a few quick strides away. I sat up a little too quickly. Adrenaline was kicking in. A spring in the crappy second-hand recliner I had passed out on popped, causing an insignificant yet audible click throughout the house. Rolling followed. It was very slow. So slow that one's ear could lose the deep droning tone after long enough to background noise. I slowly sat back and the recliner crinkled ever so softly. The thing made a noise so intentionally imperceptible, I could hardly make it out. A metallic sliding sound, the sound of a door's latch being methodically opened. It was leaving the kitchen and maybe it was moving on to one of the other doors now. The yellow sliver of light went out, and the apartment was now totally dark. Rolling persisted, and I was barely able to perceive the noise. I spent the next few minutes sliding off my recliner with the precision of prey which I undoubtedly had become. 30 minutes could have passed before I had crawled close enough to see under the door's crack. I carefully positioned my left eye to where I could see out into the black hallway just enough. Something impossibly dark. Darker than the natural blackness of night. It was just sitting in the hall, waiting. It was large and boxy, just like that silhouette in 3118. It looked to almost perfectly fit the dimensions of the hall, leaving me sealed in. I'm dead. Maybe not. Maybe I can call the police or something and distract it. It'd kill them though, right? Then I'd be a murderer. Maybe. Or maybe it would roll away. Maybe it isn't bulletproof. I can't have anyone else's blood on my hands. Maybe I can start a fire somehow, and then the fire department will be able to rescue me from the window. Maybe that's the stupidest thought I've ever had. Too much noise. I can't make any noise. I can't make a sound or it'll come get me. My thoughts were so frantic and visceral, I feared even they would make a sound which could be intercepted by the masterful listener, sitting mere feet away. Another 30 minutes of eternity, and I had silently made my way towards the large windows. I was so cautious and so deliberate in my movements as to not touch the tiniest plastic shard on the ground from when I had drunkenly destroyed the light switch. Maybe I made it angry by doing that. Maybe, in breaking the switch, the thing reverted back to me. Or maybe I exposed myself to it when I smashed that switch. I tried to use my phone and call for help, text for help, email for help. None of it was going through. That rolling demon must have jammed my signal somehow. I ran out of hope. I froze in place. Eventually, I just started to write all of this. I'm still in the home theater, typing this all out on my phone as quietly as I can, even sipping the last of my whiskey with the most delicate swigs one could imagine. This whole thing is rather bleak, and I apologize if you stumble across this. I've scheduled this post to go up in 8 hours. Maybe by then the thing will have left and my final words will get out into the world to be forgotten or laughed at. I'm sure you think I'm insane, or maybe I'm just a liar. And that's okay. I know what happened here tonight. I don't know how or why any of this happened, but I know the rolling thing outside my door is real. I don't know why it's here, what its motivation is, if it's man-made or some impersonation of something we'd engineered, or maybe it's the very muse of humanity's chase for right angles and industrial design. I now understand how those people in room 3118 and 3116 met their fate on the cracked pavement below. I think it wants me to kill myself. Either that or it's totally content with me killing myself. It's had me trapped in this room for hours now. It could have barged in and flattened me at any point, but it hasn't yet. Funny how this all started in this extra room of mine. Funny how these windows are the ideal design and size for me to throw myself from this hellish place. I don't know anymore. At this point, I'm just trying to buy time and sip more whiskey before the inevitable. I had been distracted in writing this for a few hours. and even began to have hope that when the sun came up, the thing would roll away. All I'd need is a few minutes to get out. I don't think I'm so lucky, though. The sky is beginning to brighten into a deep blue, and once again I hear that steady rolling, so slow and meticulous. It must only be moving a centimeter every 15 minutes. The whiskey is doing its job, and it's becoming harder to type, harder to maintain literacy. I think I'll wrap this up here. I'm sorry, everyone. I can only hope this is seen, and if you did see this, I thank you for keeping me company, in a way. The sun's almost up. I hear rolling, and it's close. The view from the window is very nice. It's looking like a nice day. I hope it is a nice day. As you've probably gleaned from the title of this post, I'm an urban explorer. My specialty is finding and investigating structures that, for lack of any better description, just don't make sense. Sometimes it's something small, like a house that's slightly wider on the inside than the outside. That's quite common, and often goes unnoticed. Maybe a door gets minutely wider as you open it, then returns to its original dimensions when it gets closed. Then there's the big stuff. The stuff I'm actually interested in. Rooms that shouldn't exist, impossibly high ceilings, that sort of thing. I don't normally post anything here. I tend to just read all your spooky stories and personal experiences, which makes me feel like my experiences aren't that unusual to be having, as bizarre as that sounds. I wanted my first post here to be a document of all the weird encounters I've had with strange places over the years. This post will still be that, but if I'm going to talk about all that, I also need to go into the events of the last month, which ultimately led to all my friends taking a step back from urban exploration altogether. So, a bit of background. I live in the UK, in Manchester. Like all cities, it has nice parts and not so nice parts. As much as I love the city, sometimes it feels like there isn't much to do. At least, nothing that interests us. So every few weeks, me and my group of friends hop on a train and go somewhere else. We pack bags full of camping equipment, torches, high-vis vests, plenty of rope, and anything else we think we might need. We scope out a spot, which normally involves checking social media for people talking about how they had an unusual experience near an abandoned building after dark, or how a family pet disappeared near a decommissioned train tunnel, stuff like that. Once we have a spot that's likely to be the kind of thing we're after, we figure out what we might need, what we are likely to encounter, etc. Most explorations are fairly routine. We stay the night nearby, watching the area to see if there are any guards or squatters. 9 times out of 10, there aren't. Then we make our entry. Typically, we open the door or poke our heads in through a window first, just to see what we're dealing with. You never know when you are going to walk through the front door without a care in the world and fall down a bottomless pit. No, that hasn't happened yet. It very nearly happened to one of the guys last year, but we've been very cautious since then. Some of my favorite places include, I love the possibly endless train tunnel. It was a lot of fun. I won't say where it is. I don't want a bunch of people to go there and ruin the spot with graffiti and rubbish and syringes and the like. Actually, I just looked it up and apparently the police walled up both ends and sealed the tunnel a few months ago. A shame. Definitely my favorite place to visit. I hope no one ended up cluelessly wandering in. I was in there with another guy, and I remember very vividly the moment where we crossed over into the Twilight Zone, as my mate put it. He wasn't far off. When we were walking, we could feel the air gently moving through the tunnel, even though we couldn't see the other end in the darkness. We knew there was an opening that air was blowing through. There was the occasional scatter of a squirrel or rat or something, which freaked us out every time it happened, sending the pair of us into a brief laughing fit over how much we had jumped. And then, after walking for about 5 minutes, the subtle breeze stopped. When it happened, we both instantly realized and stood motionless. It was like both ends of the tunnel had closed. There were no more rats or squirrels, just the pair of us, alone in the quiet darkness. Naturally, we were grinning like giddy kids. My torch didn't work, nor did my mate's. We tried tugging the ropes secured around our waists to let our friends at the tunnel's entrance know that we were past the threshold, but they couldn't feel any tension in the rope from their end. We kept on walking. This tunnel wasn't very long, but you couldn't see the daylight at the end because the tunnel actually had a slight curve in it. In the past, before the anomaly formed, you'd walk through the tunnel and in 2 minutes, you would be out the other side. We walked for 20. The slight curve in the tunnel leading us around in a wide arch until we reckoned we were actually facing back the way we came. We stood there, theorizing how far the tunnel carried on curving around, debating whether to go further. We eventually decided not to. I didn't fancy walking for hours just to end up finding a dead end or something. When we reached the opening we had come from, the sounds of the world returned. Such an eerie feeling. Being outside time and space, that's absolutely not a proven theory, by the way. That's just what I'm going with. It's like once you step past the threshold, the world outside stops existing, or maybe it's you that stops existing for a moment. These strange places always smell the same. It's always the same persistent metallic odor. Sometimes it gets so intense that your eyes start to burn. Sometimes it can help you to find a threshold. There was one house we went to a couple years ago. One of my friends knew someone who said their house suddenly had an extra floor. That was extremely exciting. It's not every day you get to pinpoint the exact day a building changed. Most of the time, we got to a place to find that the building had been that way for a while. But this one was fresh. Houses are particularly odd to visit. Sometimes it's just an extra room, so we have to wander through the entire house until we find a room that smells like metal, often with weird pictures on the walls and no windows. This house was different. A whole new floor had seemingly grown overnight, and the best part? It wasn't just one new floor. After exploring the house for probably a good 2 hours, our watches stopped working. We counted 16 additional floors in this 2-story house. The only reason we stopped climbing the endless staircase was because our buddies outside ran out of rope. That's another thing. We never go into a property without a length of rope tied around us, fed back to 2 guys standing outside, mainly so the guys inside can find their way out. We typically carry a few 60 and 70 meter lengths of mountaineering rope each, giving us about 500 meters when tied end to end. At one point we carried closer to 700 or 800 meters, but at that point it got tough to transport. We all wake up in cold sweats from nightmares, where we found ourselves lost in an abandoned building with no windows or doors, breathlessly diving down endless hallways, crying out for anyone to find them. Not pleasant. I remember the place we went to that first made the rope a necessary precaution. There was a small patch of woodland somewhere on the west coast of Wales near a residential area. Again, no specifics. Not because I don't want to ruin the spot. This time, I straight up don't want people flocking there and getting themselves killed. We saw on social media, mainly Reddit, that a couple people's pets had gone missing around there. They thought a predatory animal might be in the woods, so they sent animal control to do a sweep, which didn't take long since it's an area of about 50 trees. It came up clean. That's what got our interest piqued. We showed up and started doing some surveillance. We had a theory that the anomaly was only manifesting during the night, which we had seen once or twice before at other locations. Probably something to do with the decreased visibility. We were right. We went in after dark and suddenly the wooded area of 50 trees turned into a dense forest seeming to go on for miles. Me and my buddy walked for 30 minutes before we stopped and headed back. Even with the rope tied around our waists, leading back to our friends at the edge of the woods, we still got lost. It was dark enough that we could barely see our ropes. We ended up circling around trees and each other's lines. We couldn't call out to the others either, since sound works differently once you are past the threshold. That means we couldn't hear them, and they couldn't hear us. After a while of awkwardly stumbling around in the dark, single file with my hand on his shoulder, pulling our ropes constantly to keep the tension, we made it out. That was the most frightened I have ever been when exploring a place. We don't do forests anymore. Some guy one of my friends used to hang out with always wanted to find out what caused the anomalies to form. We tended not to tell anyone about the anomalies, since the news and the police always cover up any instances, and we didn't want our friends or family getting taken in the night by G-men. That being said, some people came to know about them, this guy being one. He had a theory that a power plant he lived near was actually a secret underground hadron collider. That sounded awesome. So of course we checked it out. It turned out that the power plant was one of these strange places. We managed to dodge to surprisingly lax security and got in through a window to find that the geometry inside made absolutely no sense. There was no ceiling, first of all, just walls and doors that extended upwards into the darkness. A lot of rooms were either too big or far too small to make sense, and plenty of them were in weird places relative to the building's dimensions. By far the weirdest part was that this power plant was still in use. Workers still went in through the front door and came out hours later like regular plant workers, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the interior of their building looked like something fresh out of Stephen King's nightmares. I started believing that guy after seeing all that. I don't know about the Hadron Collider theory, but that building definitely has something to do with something. In terms of which of us came the closest to finding out why these weird structures exist, and how they keep forming, I reckon he got the closest. And then, last month, my mate and I went to check on him at his house. Apparently he hadn't been responding to texts or calls, which was strange since he never just dropped off the grid like that. Even if he was going on holiday or something, he would let someone know. When we got to his front door, it was slightly ajar. We got worried at that point, so we pushed it open. Inside was a vast expanse of darkness. No walls, no ceiling, just a flat floor extending inwards until the light from the outdoors dissipated far into the distance. A couple days later, we went in with our equipment and ropes. The area was far wider than the house's floor plan. I think we ended up walking the length of a football field, if not more. I was in his house a couple months before this. Now he was gone, along with all his possessions, his ugly carpet, his old armchair, his goldfish. Everything. Every trace of him gone. We optimistically thought that he might have come home from work to find his home like that and tried walking in. We thought that if we walked far enough and called out his name loud enough, that he might find his way back. We didn't want to grapple with the possibility that the anomaly formed while he was still inside, and that he just blinked out of existence along with his possessions. The police taped up the doors and boarded the windows, and a week later his house was knocked down. The anomaly was gone. Believe me, we tried to get back through the threshold, but it was gone. We stopped trying to find out the cause of the strange places after that. We just dropped our theories and left it alone. We don't go near the power plant. We don't even talk about it. This is the first time I'm mentioning it. My friends moved on from urban exploration for a while. They stepped up on their families and stable jobs, and they wouldn't risk any of it to explore another strange house or abandoned warehouse. That lasted all of a month. We still go out to abandoned buildings and train tunnels, as if in defiance of our fears. Yes, we have fears. Fears that we will wake up one day in a black void that was once our home. But for now, none of us are going to stop doing what we love. We just can't leave it alone. I actually tried to walk away from it all, but it's just too exhilarating. I get too much of a buzz from stepping past a threshold, that feeling of time standing still, sounds of the outside world being replaced with stone silence, like hands clasped over my ears. I live for that feeling, knowing that, to the rest of the world, For that brief moment, I simply don't exist. I didn't think one sip would change everything. It started at a gas station just outside Denver. I'd been driving cross country to reset my life. New job, new city, no baggage. Just me, the road, and the radio. I stopped to stretch my legs and grab a drink. The cooler was half empty. Probably hadn't been restocked in a week. One bottle caught my eye. Black plastic, no label except a small red triangle printed on the cap. No brand name, no ingredients. Just that triangle. I should have known better. But it was cold and I was thirsty. I twisted the cap, and as soon as I raised it to my lips, I smelled it. Something off. Sweet, but too sweet. Like rotting fruit drowned in cough syrup. Still, I took a sip. The taste was wrong. Metallic, bitter almost. Dusty. I gagged, spit it onto the floor, and dropped the bottle. The cashier looked at me like I'd thrown a grenade. "What the hell are you doing?" he snapped, rushing out from behind the counter. "Something's wrong with that drink," I said, wiping my mouth. He stared at the puddle, then at me, then at the bottle. And then he ran. I stood there stunned as the door jingled behind him. I waited a few seconds, called out. Nothing. Finally, I walked outside and saw his car peel out of the lot, tires screaming. That's when the fear crept in. That bottle wasn't just bad. It was meant to be bad. That night I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about that triangle. I searched the internet for hours. Reddit, weird forums, conspiracy threads, but nothing useful. Just dead ends and half-baked urban legends. The next morning I hit the road again. By afternoon, a black SUV had been behind me for over 60 miles. Every turn I took, it took. Every exit, it followed. Finally, I pulled off into a crowded strip mall. The SUV parked 2 rows down. 3 men got out, all in black suits, wearing mirrored sunglasses. No smiles, no talking, just scanning. I ditched my car and ran. That was 6 days ago. Since then, I've been hiding in motels, moving every night. The black SUVs keep finding me. Sometimes they don't bother hiding. Sometimes they knock on the door pretending to be cops or hotel staff or delivery guys. I stopped answering. I stopped sleeping. I can barely eat. One night I found a thread on a dark web forum. Someone else mentioned the triangle, said it's part of something called the selection. They didn't explain it, but they said this: drink it and die in peace. Spit it out, and you're prey. I replied, begged for answers. They sent me a private message. Every year they manufacture 1,000 unmarked bottles. They're placed at random locations across the US. Gas stations, vending machines, cafes. Most drink and die instantly. Quiet, clean. No mess, no questions. But if you reject the offering, they come. I don't know who they are. I've been stabbed once, chased 4 times, and drugged in a motel coffee this morning. I only drank half before I smelled the same syrupy scent. They're not trying to kill me quickly. They want fear, exhaustion, panic. I think I ruined something sacred. I rejected their sacrament, and now they're enjoying the hunt. I haven't seen my reflection in 3 days. I'm afraid of what I'll see, how much I've changed, how hollow I've become. If you find a drink with a red triangle on the cap, don't sip it, don't open it, walk away. Because if you spit it out, you'll never stop running, and they never stop hunting. When my grandfather passed, I inherited his cabin by the lake. It wasn't much. 1 story, drafty in winter, built back when insulation meant more wood. But it was quiet, peaceful at least, that's what I thought. I moved in last fall. The air smelled like wet pine and the lake behind the house looked like black glass at night. I'd stand on the back porch with a beer, listening to crickets and the occasional splash from fish breaking the surface. For the first month it was perfect. No neighbors for a mile, no traffic, no city noise. Then I started hearing it. The first night it was around 2 a.m. I'd fallen asleep on the couch and woke up to what sounded like someone slowly dragging a shovel through the mud outside. Long, wet scrapes. Pauses between them, like they were listening for something. I sat up, held my breath, and it stopped. The next morning I checked the shore. There was a line in the mud, about 4 inches deep, starting from the tree line and ending at the water's edge. No footprints, just that strange trench. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching the cabin at night. I kept the curtains closed, but every so often I'd hear that same dragging sound outside, always starting in the woods and heading toward the water, always stopping when I got too close to the windows. One night in December, I caught it. I woke to the sound again, this time closer, right outside the porch. I crept to the back door and pulled aside the curtain just enough to peek. There was something standing in the frost-covered yard, backlit by the moon. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with limbs too long for its body. Its skin hung in loose folds like it had been stretched over the wrong frame. It was holding something in one hand, a stick maybe. No, not a stick. It was a long, pale spine. The sound I'd heard was it dragging the tip of it through the frozen dirt. Its head? God, its head. It didn't have a face, not in the way we do, just a long vertical slit, opening and closing like gills, flexing in the cold air. I must have made some noise because its head snapped toward me, that slit opening wide enough to show rows of needle-thin teeth inside. Then it turned and walked into the lake, not into the shallows, straight in, until the water swallowed it whole. I tried to convince myself I was dreaming, but over the next week I found more of those trenches in the mud, always leading to the water, always starting closer to the cabin. Last night, it changed. I woke to the sound again, dragging, slow, but this time it didn't stop. It moved around the cabin, circling it. Once, twice, then it stopped at the front door. The porch creaked. And then I heard it tapping. Something sharp rapping on the wood in slow, steady beats. 3 taps, pause. 3 taps like it was waiting. I didn't open the door. I waited with a kitchen knife in my hand until dawn. When I finally got the nerve to check outside, the porch was covered in frost except for where it had stood. The boards there were slick with something that wasn't ice. It was thick, almost gelatinous, and smelled faintly like blood. It's almost midnight now. The cabin feels smaller somehow. The lake's black surface is perfectly still, and somewhere out there, I can hear it dragging that spine again, this time coming from the shoreline toward me. I think it's getting bolder. I double-checked every lock in the cabin, front door, back door, windows, even the crawl space hatch under the kitchen. Every latch slid into place with a soft click that felt far too quiet against the sound outside. The dragging had stopped. That was worse. I stood in the living room, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, listening. The only sound was my own breathing, quick, uneven. Then, from somewhere behind the cabin, I heard it, a slow, deliberate creak of wood under weight. The back porch. I forced myself to keep still, every muscle in my body rigid. The sound came again, closer this time, and then there was a new one, the faint rasp of nails, or claws, tracing the length of the siding. It was walking the perimeter. The scratching moved from the back to the side, dragging low near the foundation, then high up by the windows, testing the walls, measuring me. I thought about turning on the outside floodlight. Then I thought about the possibility of seeing it. My hands shook so bad I nearly dropped the flashlight. When it reached the front of the cabin, it stopped. Silence again. I kept my eyes on the door, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then, the tapping. 3 slow knocks, each one heavier than the last, making the door shudder in its frame. Pause. 3 more. It did that for nearly a minute. Then the sound changed. A wet, rhythmic thud against the wood, like it was pressing something heavy into the door and dragging it down. I imagined that pale spine, slick with whatever was on the porch boards the night before, leaving streaks down the grain. I backed away toward the bedroom, still facing the door. My plan was to lock myself in, maybe wedge the dresser against it, but before I could move more than a few steps, the cabin groaned. Not from the door, from above. My stomach dropped. The roof. I could hear it moving, each step bending the old beams just enough to make them moan. It was slow, deliberate, pacing the length of the house like a predator above a cage. Dust drifted down from the ceiling fan as it stopped directly over me. That's when I heard it breathe. It wasn't the kind of breath you take through lungs. It was a deep, vibrating pull of air that made the walls hum, like the cabin itself was being inhaled, and mixed into it was a faint, wet clicking, like teeth snapping together in some private rhythm. I didn't move, didn't blink. My legs felt hollow, barely able to hold me up. Then something fell from the ceiling. It landed right in front of me. A piece of wood, no bigger than my thumb, splintered and dark with moisture. I looked up, and for the briefest second, I saw it between the slats. That slit where its face should be. Teeth flexing inside, wet with strands of something that clung like spider silk. It slid out of view again. That was it. I bolted for the bedroom and locked the door. I shoved the dresser in front of it, then sat on the floor with my back against the wall, knife pointed at the door like I'd be able to do anything if it came in. It paced the roof for what felt like hours. Every so often it would stop and I'd hear that long, deep inhale again. Only this time, I realized it wasn't drawing in the cabin. It was smelling me. At some point, the pacing stopped entirely. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I strained to hear anything. Footsteps, scratching, the drag of the spine, but there was nothing. I thought maybe it had left. Then the bedroom window behind me began to bulge. The glass didn't crack, it didn't shatter. It pushed inward like something was pressing against it from outside. The bulge grew, stretching until I could see the faintest outline of that slit, teeth just barely visible behind the thin distortion of the glass. It didn't strike. It didn't try to break in. It just stayed there, breathing against the window until the pane was fogged over from the inside. And then, so slowly I almost missed it, the fog began to pull back, like it was drawing my air out with it. When the sun finally rose, the window was clear, the roof was empty, the porch was bare, but in the frost at the end of the driveway, I found a single mark, a trench in the dirt, starting at the road and ending at my front steps. It's almost midnight again now, and I can hear it coming back. I'd been awake all day. No naps, no dozing on the couch. I wanted to be alert for tonight. Didn't matter. When darkness settled over the lake, the exhaustion hit me like a drug. My eyelids felt weighted, my head thick and heavy. It wasn't just lack of sleep. It felt imposed, like the air was laced with something pulling me under. I fought it by pacing the cabin, flashlight sweeping every corner. The walls creaked in the cold, but beneath that, I could hear the lake, a soft, constant lap, lap, lap of water on the shore. And over it faintly, that dragging sound again. I killed every light inside. If it wanted to see me, it would have to look through the dark. I stationed myself in the kitchen, where I could see both the front and back doors. The dragging came closer, circling the cabin, then it stopped. I didn't hear it for almost 5 minutes. Then the sound came again, inside the walls. The noise was subtle at first, like something brushing along the insulation. Then it got heavier, shifting, moving from the kitchen wall toward the living room. The boards shivered with each scrape, like it was wedging itself through spaces too small for anything human. I backed up, keeping the knife raised. The sound reached the corner where the chimney met the wall and stopped. A soft, hollow thunk came from the fireplace. I'd never used it. The flue had been closed since I moved in. Now the metal lever clinked once, twice, before the cover inside began to bulge downward. Bits of soot fell into the empty hearth. Something was forcing the flue open from the wrong direction. The cover gave with a sharp metallic ping, swinging down hard enough to rattle the fire tools on their hooks. For a moment, there was only darkness inside. Then a hand slid into view. It was too long, too thin. The skin was that same loose, folded hide I'd seen before, but it shifted unnaturally, like something was swimming just beneath it. The fingers bent in ways they shouldn't as they searched along the brick, tapping and probing. They reached the edge of the hearth and stopped. The tips turned upward toward me, slowly, deliberately. I stepped back. The fingers curled into a beckoning motion. I don't remember deciding to run, but suddenly I was in the bedroom, shoving the dresser harder against the door than before. My breath came in quick bursts, and each one felt stolen from me. For a few minutes I heard nothing. Then, faint, nearly inaudible, came a tapping from the other side of the bedroom wall. It started near the floor, rose higher, then higher still, until it was right over my head. That's when I remembered the attic. The cabin didn't have a proper attic, just a low crawl space above the ceiling, accessible from a panel in the hallway. I could hear the sound moving across it now, the boards flexing with each crawl. The panel creaked. It didn't fall open. Instead, I saw one corner pressed downward slightly, like something was testing it. A single hairline crack appeared in the wood, then another. Dust fell in thin streams. And in the dust were little wet spots, like condensation from breath. I held the knife so tight my hand went numb. I was ready for the panel to drop, ready for it to pour through, but it didn't. Instead, the sound moved back across the ceiling toward the living room, and then came the worst part: silence. I sat there for nearly an hour before I worked up the courage to check. I slid the dresser away in small jerks, every creak loud enough to make my chest ache. When I stepped into the hall, the panel was flush again. No sign it had moved. The living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. Even the hearth looked untouched. I started to think maybe it had given up. Then I saw the front door. The deadbolt was still locked. The chain was still in place, but the entire door frame was subtly warped, bowed inward like it had been under immense pressure from the outside. And in the center of the door, pressed into the wood, was the shape of a handprint. Too large, too thin, with fingers that tapered into points. It hadn't been trying to get in through one way. It had been testing all of them. I'm writing this now as the sun comes up, but I don't know how much longer I can stay here. It's learning the cabin, learning me. Last night it tried the roof, the walls, the fireplace, the attic, and the door. Tonight it might not try at all. Tonight it might succeed. I didn't sleep at all today. Not that it matters anymore. I nailed the windows shut, wedge-locked the doors, stuffed blankets in the fireplace and duct-taped them in place. Even put a chair under the attic panel so I'd hear it fall. The cabin feels like a coffin I've built for myself. The lake is wrong tonight. It's too small, like the water itself is holding its breath. Even the crickets have gone silent. The air feels thicker, almost humid, but cold enough to make my teeth ache. I'm sitting at the kitchen table with the knife and flashlight in front of me. I keep telling myself I'm ready, that if it comes, I'll know where to hit. But there's no plan here, no strategy, just waiting. The first sound isn't dragging. It's knocking. Not at the door, from inside the walls. It's moving fast, circling me in tight loops. The sound bouncing from one corner of the cabin to the next. The boards are trembling, dust falling in little showers. Then the knocks stop. From somewhere above, the roof bows inward, creaking under weight. I glance at the attic panel, still closed, still pinned under the chair. Something drips onto the kitchen table. I look up. The ceiling above me is damp, water stains spreading outward in a slow bloom. But it's not water. It's that same gelatinous, faintly bloody stuff I found on the porch weeks ago. Another drop lands on my hand. It's warm. The attic panel doesn't open. It bursts, knocking the chair aside, wood splintering as something unfolds itself through the gap. I see limbs first, too many to count in the moment, sliding down the wall, folding over the counter, bracing against the floor. And then the head. That slit where its face should be flexes wide, and I hear it. Not a roar, not a hiss, but a deep inhalation that makes the lights flicker. The air feels thinner instantly, my chest tightening as it pulls at something deeper than breath. I run. I don't remember making the choice, but suddenly I'm at the back door, kicking the chair away from the handle, fumbling with the locks. Behind me, the thing's limbs slap against the floor in uneven rhythms, scraping, reaching. I slam the door open and bolt into the night. The cold bites through me immediately, the air wet and sharp. The lake's black surface stares back at me, and for a second, I consider running for the tree line instead. But there's movement between the pines. Too tall, too thin. More than one. The water is my only option. I make it halfway down the slope before something hits the porch behind me. The sound is heavy, final, like it's dropped from the roof to give chase. I don't look back. I can hear it though, that wet spine dragging through the grass as it runs. The shoreline is slick. I nearly fall as I hit the shallows, but I don't stop. I dive into the freezing water, kicking hard until the cabin is a shadow against the hill. I turn then, just to see if it followed. It's standing at the shore, perfectly still, watching. The slit in its head opens wide, teeth flashing in the moonlight, and then it does something I haven't heard before. It laughs. Not a human laugh, not even close, but the rhythm is there, the rise and fall, like it's mocking me for thinking the lake could save me. Then it steps forward into the water. I don't remember swimming to the far side. I don't remember climbing out. I remember waking up at dawn on the gravel road barefoot, shivering so hard I couldn't speak. The sheriff drove me into town. I didn't tell him what happened. I just said someone broke in. He offered to send someone to check the property, but I told him to let it go. Because I know what they'll find. Nothing. I'm writing this from a motel 20 miles away, but I can't stop looking at the bathroom door. It's shut, but every now and then, I hear a faint dripping sound behind it. If you are anywhere near the lake east of Miller's Crossing, if you hear dragging in the night, don't look out the window. It doesn't matter how well you lock the doors. It's already inside. We moved into the old house after the miscarriage. My husband said a change would be good for me. Fresh air, quiet, place to heal. We didn't plan to find a baby. It was our second night there. We heard crying, soft, high-pitched, coming from the attic. My husband thought it was a cat, but when he pulled the cord to the attic door, the crying got louder. He found her swaddled in moldy blankets. No note, no explanation. Just her, nestled in the dust, barely alive. We called the police. They took her to the hospital. No missing child reports. No birth certificate. No DNA match. She's a ghost child, the nurse joked. The state was going to put her in the system. My husband wouldn't allow it. We were meant to find her. He said, maybe she's the reason we came here. We named her Lily, brought her home. The first night, the baby monitor whispered, not crying, whispers. She's back. We brought one. My husband thought it was a glitch. I knew better. Every night, Lily stared into the dark corners of the room and laughed at things I couldn't see. The monitor whispered in different voices, all of them dry and eager. Don't take her. She's ours. I wanted to leave. He wouldn't. He was obsessed with her. Wouldn't let me hold her anymore. Wouldn't let me in the nursery. She cries when you touch her, he said. She only wants me. One night I woke up alone, his side of the bed cold. I found the nursery door locked from the inside. Then the crying stopped. When I broke down the door, the crib was empty. He was gone. No sign of a struggle, no footprints. Just an old baby blanket soaked with something black and thick. It smelled like soil and rot. The monitor lay in the crib, still on. She's not yours, it whispered. She never was. But he is now. The police asked questions. Searched, found nothing. No signs he'd ever been there. No fingerprints, not even his clothes. They showed me the hospital records. There was never a baby registered under the name Lily. There was never a baby at all. I still hear her at night, not crying, laughing, from the attic. I found a listing online. Furnished basement room for rent. Private entrance. $400 a month. No pets, no questions. It was sketchy, but I was desperate. I'd just lost my job and my savings were circling the drain. The landlord was a tall, thin man who didn't smile. He handed me a key, told me the rules. Stay in my room after 9 p.m. Don't go upstairs. Never look through the keyhole. I laughed. He didn't. People think they want to know. They don't. I should have walked away. Instead, I moved in. The first night was uneventful, except for the sound of footsteps above me. Constant pacing, all night. Fast, then slow, then faster again, like someone running in circles. On the third night, I woke up to scraping, not footsteps, nails dragging across the ceiling. I went upstairs despite the rules. The hallway was pitch black, every door shut except one at the far end. Open a crack, soft, wet breathing echoed from it. I turned back. The next morning the landlord stood at my door. You went up, he said, not angry, sad. I didn't go in, I told him. Doesn't matter, it saw you. That night, the pacing turned into thumping, something slamming against the floor above. I stuffed towels under my door, turned the TV up, and prayed for daylight. At 3:12 a.m. the power died. Silence. Then, knocking. Not on the front door, on my bedroom door. 3 slow knocks. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. Then a voice, soft and gurgling. Let me in. I want to see who you are. I stayed frozen until morning. When the sun rose, the door was wide open. The landlord was gone. His car, his things, all of it. I called the police. They searched the house. Only one thing was strange, they said. There's no upstairs. The blueprints showed a one-story home. No second floor, no staircase. They thought I was crazy. But last night, I found the keyhole he warned me about. In the hallway, hidden behind a false panel, my hands were shaking. I looked. All I saw was an eye, looking back. Not human, too wide, all pupil. Then it whispered, Found you. Now I hear footsteps again. Only this time, they're below me. This happened when I was about 14 years old. It still sits ingrained in my memory. We moved a few times in my life. My parents taught school, but eventually my father took a role in a country church in the rural US. A good, quiet community. Folks were nice enough and we settled in just fine. Our home was not far from the church facility itself, out in rural farmland. Our home was one of those typical country houses with a long driveway, at least 300 feet from the house to the road. My main chore/job was to take out all the trash and take out the trash bin to the roadside for the garbage pickup the next morning. I collect all the interior trash, get it into the bin, and get my shoes on to roll it up the driveway and up to the road. It was a clear night. The stars were out, and though there was some dim glow from the town we lived in, we could see them clearly enough. We had a nearby neighbor in the next land plot over, whose property was mostly cornfields and some woods lining the property up next to ours. This becomes relevant in a bit. I'm walking down the driveway, whistling a favorite tune, looking up at the stars, dragging the heavy trash bin full of garbage out towards the road. Things get darker as I head down the driveway, but I knew my way pretty well by then, the distant glow of the front porch light giving me a slight guide. Halfway up the driveway or so, I froze when I looked to the left. The silhouette of a white canine stood there, staring at me. At first I started to panic, thinking it was a wolf, but then I realized that didn't make sense, as there are no wolves where we live. I slowly started moving forward again, thinking it was no big deal. Then the thought dawned on me. There are coyotes out here, but white coyotes shouldn't exist around here. That seems odd. I decided to move at a faster pace. At that moment, the canine comes out of the woods and starts moving towards me, slowly at first. My heart leapt into my throat. It then speeds up into a trot beelining towards me. I'm really beginning to sweat as, though I've made it to the road, there's barely any light out there, and I don't have anything blunt I can use to defend myself if this thing is hostile. The animal gets close enough that I can see it's obviously just a dog, not a wolf or a coyote or anything scary. It comes up and just stops. No sniffing, no friendly actions towards me, but no hostility either. It just stands and stares at me. In the dim glow of the porch light, I see it has a black collar on, with a little tag shining on it. The tag is square in shape and has a name on it. Buck. The dog, I presume, is named Buck, eventually stops staring at me and slowly moves on beyond our driveway. It stops abruptly, takes a defensive stance, and starts growling in a low rumble. This is where I become unsettled. I looked at where the dog was staring and growling. Just across the road in the cornfield, I see a pair of glowing something. 2 dots. I can't tell if they're just eyes shining from maybe a bobcat or a deer or something else. The issue is, they were too high up off the ground to be a small animal, almost like something taller, standing there. Something felt very off about that moment, and just as I began to consider what those dots were, the dog lurched forward, barking and sprinting towards them. They disappeared into the cornfield, the tall corn plants rustling, with the dog darting in after. I'm slowly backing away, the crickets chirping like a harmony to this entire situation, when all of a sudden, the scariest howl I'd ever heard rang out. My fight-or-flight instinct kicked in, and I went into a all-out sprint for the house. Got inside and locked the storm door and front door immediately. I'm in a cold sweat and my dad asks what happened. I tell him what occurred outside and where the dog had come from, and he decides we'd go over and ask our neighbor if maybe it was their dog and I'd just witnessed it catching a deer or coyote or something it wanted. The next morning, we got up, had breakfast, then walked over to our neighbor's house to describe to him the events of last night. I tell him the description of the dog and say I saw a tag named Buck on it. He stands there, bites his lower lip, then asks if we're sure that's what we saw. I tell him I was certain. Black collar, square tag with the word Buck on it. He takes us to his backyard near his metal barn, to a small wooden cross with a black dog collar hanging on it, a square tag with the word Buck on it. Buck was my farm dog and best friend for 12 years. He died last year. My wife and I will never forget him. Son, I'm not sure that's what you saw, but that can't have been my dog. My heart both sank and started beating rapidly at the same time. What did I see last night? We lived at that home for another 2 years, without any further incidents before eventually moving away to another place in southwest Missouri, where I lived until I moved out for college. I will never forget that night, and everywhere I've lived since has been well lit with short driveways, and no cornfields nearby. Good dog. Derek first got the skeleton a couple of years ago. One night while I was brushing my teeth, I gazed out the window. In the light of my motion sensor light, I saw Derek reaching into the trunk of his car. Out he pulled a large cardboard box with the Spirit Halloween logo on it. I had never seen a bigger smile, even bigger than the one at his wedding. The next morning, while also brushing my teeth, I saw a 12-foot skeleton sitting in Derek's front lawn. It stood across the street, with its hand in a waving position. Over the next few years, I saw that skeleton in his yard for a majority of the time. Every time a new holiday would come around on the calendar, the skeleton would be put into a new outfit. Uncle Sam hat for 4th of July, Santa hat for Christmas, and just plain old skeleton for Halloween. Derek really loved the skeleton. I would see him quickly rush it inside anytime it was slightly too windy or rainy. Even during the town's tornado warning scare last year, before retreating to his basement, he collected the skeleton outside. But in October of last year, we got an HOA. I don't even know who wanted it, to be honest. They just showed up one day and made me cut my azaleas because they did not fit my house's color scheme. From the start, nobody really liked them, like all HOAs. One of those people was obviously Derek. One day, while walking past his house, I saw Derek cleaning up the skeleton a bit, so I threw him a wave. Instead of waving back, he came up to me on the sidewalk to talk to me. Hey man, I was just wondering if you had my back if I decided to stand up to the HOA. I just read through the rules and they said that I would not be allowed to display Jerry outside of October. I'm planning on keeping him up as a protest. Jerry? Are you talking about the skeleton? Oh, yeah, sorry. Forgot that's an inside joke between me and me. So if the HOA shows up and tells me to take it down, could you speak on my behalf in the HOA meeting? I felt a little bit pressured. Saying no felt a little bit rude, with how much Derek loved Jerry and all. But since the skeleton has always been a joy to see, and since I also hated the HOA, I told him yes. He repeatedly thanked me with his hands together, so when November 1st rolled around, I was prepared to see Jerry disappear, but I wasn't prepared for it to happen on November 1st. I was on my porch, sipping warm black coffee from my Jack Skellington mug. Jerry stood with his fist up, ready to fight any HOA members. Across the street, Justin was stapling Christmas lights to his roof while standing on a ladder. He had headphones in, bobbing his head to what was probably Mariah Carey. In Justin's yard was an army of Christmas inflatables. Santas, reindeer, Grinches, and many others flooded his yard. This made me mildly annoyed. As I was shaking my head behind Justin's back, a white SUV pulled in front of Derek's house. The door opened and out popped a middle-aged woman wearing a sweater vest. It was the HOA president. Pretty sure her name was Jasmine or something like that. So Jasmine marched up Derek's path and knocked on his glass screen door. While waiting for an answer, she checked her Apple Watch for the time. She probably read a time around 8 a.m. After a short wait, Derek opened the door wearing a robe. Derek opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, Jasmine spoke up. Yeah, hello Derek. I was just wondering if you were aware of what day it was, she said demeaningly. like she was speaking to a child who had to be taught a lesson. Oh, yeah, pretty short Saturday. Not that kind of day, the other kind, she said as she grabbed her nose and shook her head side to side. Oh, sorry, it would be November 1st. Have a good Halloween last night? No, my kids got all hyper and wouldn't sleep. But to why I'm here. What is that? She said as she pointed at the 12-foot skeleton behind her. That's Jerry, he said while chuckling. No, it's not. It is a violation of the HOA guidelines. No Halloween decorations up outside of October. Take it down immediately, please. No, I'm not going to do that. Derek's cheerful, goofy tone ended. He spoke with a sternness I had not heard from him before. Okay, well if you are not, then I will. And I will be forced to put it in the dumpster and fine you. She crossed her arms. If you do that, I will literally call the cops on you. That is theft. Well, let's just see whose side they are on. Once Jasmine finished saying that, she turned around and walked for the skeleton. As she did, Derek pulled out his iPhone and dialed a number and held it to his ear. He then went inside with the phone. Jasmine got up behind Jerry and put her hands on the pelvis and pushed. Jerry came tumbling over on the grass. When he hit the ground, his skull popped off and rolled to the sidewalk. Jasmine walked to it and picked it up. As her back was turned, Jerry stood himself up. Jasmine walked over to her SUV and opened the trunk. As Jasmine was waiting for the trunk to open, Jerry, still headless, walked to her and lightly tapped her on the shoulder. What do you want? She couldn't finish her sentence. She stood looking directly up at Jerry. Jerry gently pulled his skull out of her hands. Jasmine stood, mouth agape, stunned, unable to move. I have to say, when I saw this, I too was rather frightened, but I stayed sitting on my porch to watch what would happen next. Jerry would then grab Jasmine by the neck and lift her off the ground. Jasmine reached for Jerry's bony hands to free herself. She kicked her legs to assist the escape, but Jerry must have had a lot of invisible muscle, for she did not come close to escaping. Jerry then changed his grip on her from her neck to her ankle. She swayed back and forth upside down. Have you guys ever watched The Avengers? If you have, then you are familiar with the scene where the Hulk grabs Loki and repeatedly slams Loki on the ground. That is what Jerry would do to Jasmine, over and over on the pavement of the road. Jerry would slam Jasmine with all of his force. Jasmine didn't make a single sound after the first swing. After a dozen or so swings, Jasmine was dead. Most of her upper body was deformed, and her sweater vest was now soaked in blood. I sat in silence, in disbelief of what just happened. I always wonder what Derek's reaction to that was. Was it like when a parent finds out their kid is a bully in school? Was it like when a parent's child goes to prison? Or was he proud of what he saw? I really have no clue. Jerry looked up from Jasmine's body and changed his focus across the street. He breathed heavily, then started to walk towards Justin. I could hear Justin faintly singing some Christmas song. I thought of how good those headphones were, to where he couldn't hear a 12-foot skeleton approach him from behind. I thought about asking him what brand they were. Too bad I wouldn't get the chance. Once Jerry made it to the ladder, he grabbed the top of it and threw it over. I heard Justin let out a yell before I heard him and the ladder make a thump sound. I wasn't actually able to see what happened next. Most of it was blocked by Justin's minivan, but based on the movement of Jerry, Justin was being stomped to death. Justin called out for help, but it was difficult to hear over the roar of inflatables. I saw Justin's wife quickly glance out of the curtains, but after seeing what was out there, she promptly shut them. Jerry gave a few more good stomps before stopping. He then turned his attention to the inflatables in the front yard. He tore through all of them, popping Santa and killing Rudolph, tearing through the Grinch and unplugging Frosty. Standing in a pile of now dead Christmas cheer, he changed his attention to me. I could tell he was looking at my Jack Skellington mug, so I said aloud in a shaky voice, Sorry, it's actually a Halloween movie. If you have some problem with Christmas, this is not the place. He marched towards me anyway, across the street, through my yard and up to my porch. I tried to quickly stand up and run, but before I could do the running part, Jerry grabbed me by the neck and pulled me out from the porch. He started to punch me in the stomach a few times, knocking the air out of me. As he did, I saw a police cruiser down the road, probably the one called by Derek. I hoped that Jerry didn't kill me before the cruiser got there. The time it took for the cruiser to drive those few blocks felt like forever. When it finally did get to my block, I saw them nod their heads and drive away, while saying to themselves, "Nope, not today." I was on my own, repeatedly getting punched by a 12-foot skeleton. I remember this was how Houdini died. If Houdini couldn't survive this, how could I? Then for a second, Jerry stopped punching me. For a second, I thought he was letting me go, but then I was lifted over his head and flung across the street. I flew over Justin's car and landed on the fallen ladder. After hitting the ground, it took me a second to understand what was around me, but after a few deep breaths that went away, the first thing I saw was Justin's body. Oh yeah, he was stomped to death. The first thing I heard was music coming from two places. The first was from Justin's headphones in the grass. They were playing Jingle Bell Rock. The second was from a caroling minivan coming down the road towards me. I saw Jerry walking towards me before he could pick me up again. I snatched Justin's headphones. Oh, they're Beats brand. Jerry then picked me up by the skull. He placed my head in between his two massive hands. He started to squeeze. I could feel the pressure in my head building up, my eyes starting to pop out of socket. But before my head could be crushed like a jack-o'-lantern on November 1st, I slid the headphones over Jerry's ears. He immediately dropped me. Jerry fell backwards on top of a popped Santa. He started to shake, his bones clacking together like a xylophone. The minivan was 1 block away. I quickly think of something cool to say while I would end Jerry's life. It had to be something sort of relevant to Christmas or Halloween. Then I thought of something. This is what you have to understand, Jerry. Christmas, that's in 54 days. But Halloween, that's in 364. So whether you like it or not, it's Merry Frickin' Christmas. As I finished the coolest thing I ever said, I pulled my foot back and launched it forward and planted it in Jerry's chin. His head launched off like a firework, flying off into the street and perfectly underneath the front wheel of the caroling minivan. Without any difficulties, Jerry's skull was crushed. The family stopped singing Jingle Bells to ask what they had just hit. I looked down. The skeleton had stopped shaking and laid still and on the ground. I kicked at his ribs. He didn't move. I walked across the street and knocked on Derek's door to tell him what happened. When he opened, he already had tears in his eyes. He didn't even cry at his wedding, I thought. Before I could say anything, Derek ran across the street and held Jerry in his arms. I went inside my own house and called the police. Not sure who will go to prison for this one. Case still hasn't happened yet. Probably a bit hard to make sense of it all. Me and Derek have talked and we have no clue what caused Jerry to all of a sudden come alive like that. But now, if you were to drive around your neighborhood, you will not see any 12-foot skeletons named Jerry. Instead, you will see a flagpole in Derek's front yard, forever flying a skull and crossbones, with a small plaque at the bottom that reads, "In memory of the one and only Jerry." Hey everyone. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need to know if anyone has ever experienced anything like this. I live in a small farmhouse that I inherited from my grandmother 6 weeks ago when she passed away. It sits on a lot of a couple acres of land. When she passed away, I had just graduated from college. So instead of selling it, I decided I'd live in it and maintain it while I looked for a job in the area. The nearest town is around 30 minutes away from me, but I usually don't mind the seclusion. In fact, my closest neighbor is around 10 minutes away as the crow flies. The first day that I got here, I was over the moon about being the sole owner of my childhood home. The long dirt road to get you to the house was lined with dense forest, and once I finally reached the house, I realized that my grandmother had really let this place go. There were vines practically holding the shutters closed like the house was holding in a secret. I knew I was going to have a lot of work to do, but since I had a bit of savings, I could focus on getting the house back in order. When I unlocked the front door and went inside, I was met with an overpowering smell of lavender. It seemed that even though my grandmother let the outside of the house go, the inside was pristine. I set my luggage down and went into her bedroom. I spent the next week cleaning up the outside of the house. I found all kinds of things in the overgrown grass, like an old farmer's hat, gardening scissors, and coloring books that had been scribbled in. I hadn't ever seen any of these items before, but chalked it up to belonging to my cousins when they were kids. The first week of living there, nothing else really went on. It's this week, the second week, that strange things started happening. After a long day of finishing the yard work, I came inside and kicked my boots off. I made sure to lock the front door and deadbolt it, since living alone in the middle of the woods as a woman can get kind of scary. I made my way to the bathroom when I heard footsteps behind me. I whipped my head around, but I didn't see anything. I thought it was just the old house settling, so I continued to the bathroom and got into the shower. Now, I don't know if it's my mind playing tricks on me, but every time I dunked my head under the shower head, I thought I heard giggling right behind me. Once again, nothing there. I got out of the shower, dried myself off, and slipped into my pajamas. That's when I noticed something written in the steam on the mirror. Hello, smiley face. I was genuinely freaked out at this point, but knew that my younger family members had been here right after grandmother died, so I wrote it off that the writing was maybe lingering. That night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a loud knock at my door. I checked the time on my phone. 11:43 p.m. Like I said, my nearest neighbor is 10 minutes away, so I had no clue what someone was doing here late at night. Before my dad passed away, he instilled in me that the world is very dangerous. So the minute I turned 21, he paid for me to get a concealed carry license. I grabbed my pistol and tucked it into my waistband as I walked toward the front door. I could have just ignored it, but I didn't know if maybe it was the police or someone in trouble. I opened the door a bit and saw a rather small man. I'm 5'2" and he couldn't have been much taller than me, in a button-up polo with black slacks, and those shiny shoes that the pastor always wore. "Hello," he spoke up. "I'm Mr. Vister. I work for the night census." He had the biggest smile on his face, almost like he had won the lottery. "The night census?" I said suspiciously. "I've never heard of that." "Well, yes. We only knock on select doors. Think of it as a sort of government initiative for after dark population tracking." He ran his fingers through his gelled back, almost slimy black hair. "Who's all here? Has anyone been here since the last count?" Mr. Vister tried peeking around my shoulder, but I quickly shut him down. "I'm sorry, sir. What do you mean since the last count?" "We come by a couple times a night to get the exact number of people living in the household. When I came by earlier, I spoke to your gardener, and he let me know that he lived here as well as his son." He pulled up a clipboard out from behind his back. "But he didn't inform me that anyone else lived here. I'll just write it down real quick." I watched as he wrote. Young female in her late 20s, presumably alone. Under where he had already written, gardener and his young son. There was obviously no one else here, so I was extremely startled. "I don't have a gardener. I think you must have the wrong house. It's just me here." I didn't notice my slip-up until I said it. "I mean, my husband should be back any minute now. He had to run into town to get something." I tried to cover it up by lying, but he saw right through it. His smile grew wider, and he turned his head to the ground, still staring at me through his eyebrows. "We know you're here alone, Natalie." He chuckled, but not in a friendly way. It sounded like a dry rattling coming from his throat. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I could still hear his laughter outside, which turned into a sea of screaming. I ran to the bedroom to call someone, and, of course, no signal. I couldn't get to my car without him seeing me, so I had no idea what to do. I barricaded myself in my room, but I accidentally drifted off to sleep. I woke up again to a knock at the door. I looked at my phone, 3:36 a.m. I don't know if this Mr. Vister guy is some kind of prankster or lunatic. I wasn't going to let him scare me. I opened up the door and didn't let him get a word in. "Stop harassing me," I spat. "I have a gun. I don't know what you're trying to do, but you're trespassing. Go away." His smile softened into a look of confusion. "I'm sorry for disturbing you, ma'am, but I don't believe we've met." His lips curled into a smile again, and he held out his hand for me to shake. "I'm Mr. Vister, from the night census. We are—" I cut him off. "Yeah, I know who you are. You were just here." "Oh no, you must be mistaken. Me and my twin brother take turns checking houses." I was obviously confused at this point, so he pulled out his clipboard. "So you must be Natalie. I've got that you live in the bedroom towards the back of the house. Then the other occupants are the gardener, Silas, and his son, Thomas. I have here that they live in the bedroom that branches off of the family room." "No, I don't know who Silas or Thomas are, but they definitely don't live here." "What? No, I see them right back there on the couch." He stood on his tiptoes and waved to something behind me. As I turned around to see what he was waving at, Mr. Vister ran past me while giggling. I had no clue who this guy was, or why he wanted to be in my home, but I saw this as an opportunity to get out of there. I grabbed my keys from the bowl next to the door and ran to my car, leaving the front door wide open. I peeled out of there as quickly as possible to a small motel in town. That's where I am now. Do any of you know what's going on? Has anyone experienced anything like this? Any help would be appreciated. Please, help me. Dried sweat, rotten food, fermented trash, cigarette smoke, dust. The mixture of odors overwhelmed my nose. I had to take a step back, gagging. Once I filled my lungs with fresh air from the outside, I took a step in. "I'm home," I called. I left my sneakers by the foyer. Mom's boots were there, gathered among the shoes of siblings long gone. I peeked through the hall and into the living room. It was a mess. Not even the dark could hide the collage of trash, clothes, and empty meal boxes. There was a tricycle next to the couch, tiny and colorful, though children hadn't inhabited this place in almost a decade. Mom had covered the windows with aluminum foil and newspaper. No light bulbs, no lamps. She said light gave her headaches. A lantern was needed to navigate the apartment, or a smartphone. I found Mom sulking in her bedroom, curled into a ball and covered by duvets. "What took you so long?" Mom's voice was high-pitched and with a well-developed vocal fry. It resembled the creakiness of a rusty door hinge. I lowered my phone light. "I told you I went to Emma's bachelorette." "You didn't tell me a thing. I stayed here to starve." A sigh got stuck in my throat. God forbid I let it out in front of Mom. Or worse, what if I sighed and then explained to her I brought her a weekend worth of pizza and ready meals? With my money at that. Would I survive that? "Are you hungry?" I asked. "Of course I am." It gave me an excuse to leave for another room and encounter yet another frustration. All over the kitchen laid the aftermath of my weekend off. Pizza boxes and plastic containers were scattered across the counter. One of them remained inside the microwave half-eaten. There were no offerings left for Mom, as she'd eaten them all. "I'll go to the store to buy you something," I called. "Will you abandon me again?" She accented every syllable with spite. "I'll be back in an hour." If I had used a bike, the trip to the convenience store would have been 20 minutes. That also meant less time filling my lungs with clean summer air. As I walked, I ruminated on how wonderful and how terrible the sense of smell was. We cannot close our noses like we close our eyes. How inconvenient is that? If I wanted to stop smelling, I also had to stop breathing. There's another way, though. If we smell something for long enough, no matter how pleasant or disgusting, the brain mutes the scent. It took me a lifetime to grow accustomed to the smell of Mom's apartment, and only a weekend off to find it unbearable again. As I entered the supermarket, I quickly glanced at the yard section. They sold garden furniture and flowers and grilling equipment. I grew up thinking no one ever bought those. The gas tanks reminded me of a fun fact. Methane does not have a smell naturally. The characteristic rotten eggs odor gets added to it for safety reasons. That way, an individual can detect a gas leak before the whole building goes kaboom. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Emma. "Hey," I answered, searching through the ready meals. "Ready to go?" Kalavi answered on the other side. I moved the phone from one ear to the other. Although it was impossible for Mom to be around, I looked over my shoulder. "I can't do it," I said. Kalavi took a deep breath. "Terya, listen. You need to get out of there. Now." I grabbed some meatballs and potatoes. That would do. "I can't. Mom needs someone to take care of her." "What are you even saying?" When upset, Kalavi spoke slowly and accented every word just like Mom. "I'll be fine. It's Mom. She's an odd person, but she's not evil." "Are you listening to yourself?" He screeched on the other side of the line. It peaked the microphone. "I don't appreciate you yelling at me." I was on the shopping line. Only 2 people stood in front of me, but this was a minuscule town. Everyone knew everyone's faces. What if they heard Kalavi losing it over the phone? "And what do you want me to do?" At least Kalavi lowered his voice a little. "You're speaking nonsense. She ate Nina." "She didn't," I scoffed, then lowered my voice to a whisper. "Nina ran away with her boyfriend." "You saw it. You saw it happen. What are you talking about?" I envisioned Kalavi pulling his hairs out. "It was a nightmare. Seek help, I mean it." I placed the ready meal and an energy drink on the treadmill. "And Mom needs help and compassion. That's the only way she can get better." "You're not helping her. You're feeding her." The products reached the hands of the cashier, assigned to end this senseless call. "I need to go back home. Talk to you later." I hung up with Kalavi mid-sentence. I packed my purchases and walked back home. Him screaming caught me off guard. It hurt a little. We had a great bachelorette together. Unlike Mom's house, Kalavi's was clean and sleek, with plenty of sunlight and even one of those little robot vacuums rolling around. I was happy to see him doing good despite everything. I was happy to see him, period. None of the other siblings gave us that grace. They left home to disappear. Kalavi said, "They didn't leave. She ate them all." But he didn't feel like talking about Mom, much less in front of his wife. She believed he was an orphan. I shook off the memories of our weekend together. I left them at the door along with the prospect of fresh air. One deep breath and I was ready to go back home. As I microwaved the meal, I realized I'd forgotten to buy something for myself. Too late to go back to the store, however. I went to sleep hungry. A bad idea. Hunger always brought nightmares. Hungry Mom always brought nightmares. In darkness I awoke, my body unresponsive and my mind hazy. It happened so often and yet I never got used to it. Panic kicked in as usual. No matter how much I begged in my head, not even a finger would move. Even my eyes stayed glued on the same spot. I was trapped in my own body. Some light from the midnight sun bled through the window, usually a blessing. The light now delineated Mom's terrible form. She watched from the ceiling, her eyes glistening in the darkness, her floppy belly, product of almost a dozen childbirths, drooped over my immobile body. Her saggy tits dangled atop my head. Both elbows pointed towards the floor unnaturally. They were backwards. She resembled a spider. Slowly, Mom crawled down the wall, closer to the headboard. The drywall cracked as she buried her nails and toes onto it. Soon I felt her sparse hair tickling my forehead. I tried to scream, but my mouth remained shut. My lungs wouldn't breathe faster. My eyes refused to shed tears. My whole body remained still, like the corpse I'd soon become. Nina never had a boyfriend. I once saw her kissing another girl at the lake, and I saw how Mom crawled to her bed that night. Mom looked like a crocodile wearing a human suit, her arms and legs bent uncomfortably, at impossible angles. She opened her mouth wide, impossibly so. I heard the crack as her jawline popped out of its sockets. I saw how she sucked onto Nina's scalp like ice cream, then nibbled it. She crawled further into Nina's bed as she swallowed her head, then her neck, then her shoulders. She pushed forward, her breasts, her hips, her thighs. Only Nina's ankles and feet dangled out of her mouth. Mom gargled, struggling to consume the last bits of Nina. Her whole body contracted as she swallowed what was left of my older sister. I was next. I felt Mom's breath next to my ear, warm and humid. It stank of cigarettes and acid. She gently pushed my face to the side. "You let me starve." She punctured a hole in my neck, the one that never healed. I always said it was a birthmark. Immobile, helpless, stupid, with no other option, I waited until she fed herself. In my head I promised, never again. Never again I'll let this happen. Never again I'll leave Mom to starve. She needs me.